Welcome to Fantastic Tones for Human Bones. Welcome back, for those of you who have been here before.
Gotta get a cleaner intro there. No.
Okay. Welcome to Fantastic Tones. But let me do it without anger in my voice. Welcome to Fantastic Tones for Human Bones. I am Robert Woods-Ledoux. My co-host, Mark Pascucci Clifford, is here.
Hello.
Today we have a second part of an interview with Will Northlich-Redmond, who is here.
Hello. Again.
Yes. This is a part two, our first part two of a podcast. We did a previous interview covering, your work and the breadth of your catalog, and we decided that we wanted to do a totally separate interview to just to discuss your piece, Lady Dice and the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb.
That's right, Lady Dice and the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm very flattered that both of you found this interesting enough to talk about as a part two. That's flattering.
Oh yeah, it requires a deep dive, man. By the end of the last episode, I think, it seemed very appropriate that we not just and then there was this piece. So I felt like it was really necessary for us to give this piece its due because it's a big one.
Yeah, it took a long time to finish. Yep.
So I think for anyone that's just jumping in here, it's probably best to go to the first part of the interview where we really give the background a little bit on Will and everything, because we're not going to dive into all that again. We'll just start right off with this piece. Or do whatever you want. Really, we have no control over what you do, you listener of our podcast. You have your way with us. What I think I would like to do, if this makes sense for everyone, is I kind of want to just go through the score and just kind of talk about it page by page. And because there's really a lot of pieces to this, and I think all of them are kind of hard to explain.
Right.
Yeah. So are you comfortable with this being made available to listeners, or how do you feel?
Oh yeah, I mean,
okay,
it's
cool.
The best place probably to go and see it.
It's on the school website, right?
That's right. Yeah. So if a person goes to era.library.ualberta.ca, then you can go there and just do a search. Type in Lady Dice and the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb, and you will find it.
Yeah.
And you will not only find the complete master score, which is what I would recommend checking out first, but then you will also find the audio files that go along with this piece that are meant for the conductor to help to facilitate the piece to begin with. And then you will also find an entire written component which goes along with it, which helps explain what is going on in the piece itself.
Right. And there's also a recording of the first bit here on your Bandcamp site, and we'll put the links to all of these in our show notes, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's dive in. So, Lady Dice and the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb, a graphic score music drama in 5 scenes. Do you want to give us, there's the prelude, and then there's scene 1 through 5. This idea of scenes, do you want to talk a little bit about why you're organizing it in this way?
Yeah, it's sort of a part homage to the past in terms of maybe what a composer of operas might have done, how they might have organized it, which is why it is organized by scenes specifically, as well as an introduction or a prelude. But then it is also, or I call it, a music drama. I resisted the urge to call it an opera. Just for me, I mean, opera is a fine word. I don't have a problem with that. Just for me, it seems a little antiquated. I'm also, I think I may have mentioned in the last interview, the music of Richard Wagner, and some of his writings, not all of them. I'm going to make that claim right now. Mostly the music. Yeah. Bit of a you-know-what for anybody who's familiar with Wagner. But that's what you can do. You can sit around and pontificate about things all day long when you're being bankrolled by the King of Bavaria. So, but I was very struck by his definition of the artwork of the future, as he called it back in the day, in that he considered his works music dramas. And I think that kind of captures, there's probably a better word, there's probably a better terminology that goes along with this. But that was more accurate to how I wanted this piece to appear to others, and how, if I was going to describe it to somebody, how it would appear to the average listener or something along those lines. So a music drama in 5 scenes, a prelude in 5 scenes. Yeah.
And with all that, do you intend to like convey a narrative through this piece?
Yeah. So this is also fashioned partly on the kind of narrative structure of John Maxwell Davies' 8 Songs for a Mad King, as well as the pocket operas of Kurt Weill and other pieces such as this. The overall, or the overarching story is that once upon a time, long ago, and this is described in the thesis written component, which people can go to the Arrow website and read. It's the very end of the document. There was an impossibly beautiful woman, and she had suitors and admirers from all over come and try to win her attention and propose to her and become her mate, so to speak. And so she becomes jaded. She becomes bored. She becomes aloof. With the persistent onslaught of attention and onslaught of admiration. And so she retreats into what I term her mirror palace, which is where the entire opera takes place, in her mirror palace. And she believes ultimately, this is Lady Dice, by the way, who is the impossibly beautiful woman. She believes that she is the only person who is worthy enough to look at her, to admire her, to witness her beauty. And hence the mirror palace is a palace filled with mirrors. Obviously, she just is constantly looking at herself. She's constantly admiring herself. She's constantly viewing her reflection, and she's constantly with herself. She's the only person who she's essentially accompanying herself throughout this constant sequence, if you like, of personal reflection. And so years and years and years go by, and she becomes lonely. She becomes isolated. She becomes depressed because there's nobody else to talk to except her. So gradually, a kind of subconscious personality begins to take over, which is the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb. And it appears to her halfway through the opera, or the music drama, rather. It appears to her halfway through. There I go contradicting myself already. But it appears to her halfway through the work, and it begins to become her friend, right? But it's actually her. And so eventually the two personalities start to battle for control of her, their, if you like, mind. And it ultimately builds up into a climax of battling between each other as far as words, as far as singing, and the instrumental affect, or the instrumental collective of the music drama is 2 percussionists, and I chose that because or 2 batteries of percussion rather, two. Right. a battery of tuned and non-pitched percussion for two different players or four players if people wanted to perform it in such a manner. And so I really wanted to have this impact, this very staunch, this very notable, this very profound and visceral impact of these kinds of emotions, these kinds of psychological states, these kinds of instances of self-awareness, and then detaching from reality because you believe that there is another person that you are looking at because you've been alone for so long, you've been isolated for so long. This really is the core of it. This is the core of the entire story, and it just builds up into this giant miasma of screaming and yelling and hysteria, and then it ends. And I know for a fact that if I were to rehearse this with people, with actual vocalists and percussion, it's going to take some very special people, by the way, to perform this.
Yeah.
But if I were to ever do that, I know that there would be some, a good deal of discussion. It's not meant to be this 4-hour long epic, but it is quite specific and quite pronounced in its requirements in terms of extended techniques, especially amongst the vocalists, and improvisation. There's a great deal of what I refer to as syllabic utterances, which are meant to not definitively, and I explain this also in the paper, not definitively, and this is just an example of the kind of thing that you'd find in this work, but it's not meant to definitively give the viewer an answer as to what is going on. The viewer ultimately sort of creates their own narrative from time to time. That's something that's really important to me. And words in these particular cases, or syllabic utterances, become a kind of phonetic painting. And there's a great deal of visuality in this, which relates to a lot of the properties that are working together in order to create this work, in order to actualize it in a performative sense. And I find this to be, I find it actually to kind of draw upon the Wagnerian tradition of the intimate marriage of text and music in such a work. And that's exactly how Wagner approached a lot of his work. In that, when people finally identify the leitmotif, dum, bum, bim, ba-da-dum, or whatever it is, and they're following the action, they're following the words, you ultimately feel, you feel the psychological states of the characters on stage. And this is something that I really wanted to kind of feed into. This is something I really wanted to capture in a work like this.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have a couple details. I mean, you mentioned 2 percussion in terms of or 2 batteries of percussion, but also just to clarify it straight up front, there's 2 soprano, right?
Correct.
And one is Lady Dice, and one is her, I guess, alter ego or her.
Yep.
The Emerald Oyster Honeycomb, and then you ostensibly would be the conductor, but also you would also have electronics as well. You would be participating, right. Or is this something that could be performed without you, or do you feel like you're an integral part of it, like your electronics and what you've done with music in the past?
That's a great question. And at the very beginning, there is a page which discusses what a quote unquote Blipvert conductor, and we'll get to that in a minute, could be. And if anybody listened to the last interview, I'm hoping that there are some people who did, but this opera is this. Here I contradict myself again. It's my own historical aberrances that I have to get out of my head here, but.
It's all good.
Anybody who that I have to exorcise from my brain, but anybody who listened to the last interview. So this work is largely based as far as how it is controlled, how it is facilitated, how it is guided and directed by my electronic music pseudonym / personality / character. Blipvert, which typically in a live performance would man a bank of electronics, whatever that might be. It could be laptop, it could be anything really. this particular piece would call for a laptop and a MIDI controller. And I actually, if you go through the score, you'll see step-by-step instructions of what a person needs in order to facilitate this work, what is highly suggested, what would work and what wouldn't. I like to think that a work such as this could be passed on to other people, to other generations, fingers crossed. But to premiere it, I think that would have to be me.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, Schoenberg's, from what I remember, didn't premiere, I think, his first opera until 13 years after it was written. So I think I have a good 10 years to go. I got a good decade, before I'm able to do this.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm able to do it, because I certainly can't move like I used to.
Yeah, I think
bit older.
One thing I'm surprised you didn't include in the preface is, one should check out a Blipford show.
I probably should. Yeah, that's a good idea. I probably should put that in there. Yeah.
But it is you do a really good job of really being specific with what you're actually asking another performer to do in being you for this piece, which is having experience in electronic music performance, skill in improvisation, and most importantly, I would say, an energetic and frenetic approach to creativity.
Oh, absolutely.
And embodied at that, honestly.
Yeah. Well, you guys have known me for a long time, and you're familiar with what I do, and other of our mutual friends are familiar as well. But I don't know. I mean, the way I see it is that a lot of time and a lot of effort went into this work, and I don't want to get too much on a soapbox here. It's actually somewhat coincidental. I just finished reading a book which the both of you, just knowing who you are, need to read yesterday. It's called Culture Crash, written by a guy named Scott Timberg, and paints a very bleak picture of our current state of culture and how culture is disseminated, appreciated, networked, given and received by different members of society and within different institutions and within different pockets of society. It is an extraordinarily insightful book, and Scott Timberg is no longer with us, unfortunately. My philosophy, I guess, with what you just said, Bob, is that if we're gonna do this, I want to do it full on. I want people to walk away from a work, either, I mentioned this in the last interview, hating it or loving it. And I don't want anybody to be sitting there kind of going, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. Or, I'm having a good time. I'm kind of chilling.
That was neat.
This is not the kind of reaction that I want to elicit.
Don't worry about that, man. That's not going to happen at one of your shows. No, I have this might be an okay place to ask a couple of questions about that.
Sure.
Just in terms of being able to create something that big in this day and age, because you did this as a thesis piece, correct?
Correct.
And do you feel like moving forward, making something on this scale would be possible without it being in that particular setting? Like it's kind of a complicated question, and what you're talking about, you can still, on a smaller scale, design shows so it can be as balls to the wall as they can be, given what you have. But I feel like something like this, like a full-on staged music drama, like it might be a little bit more difficult to find the time and the resources to do that outside of.
Oh, without question.
Okay, cool. And so I assume that you were using this opportunity to very specifically just this is something that I want to see through, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, can you,
it's interesting you mentioned that, Mark, because this is what I refer to as a graphic score music drama. And so now we're getting into a place where something else began to germinate and take root in my own aesthetic, which was, okay, so I've always been fascinated by, and I love doing graphic scores. I mean, it's one of my passions. As a composer, I love doing graphic scores, and I love seeing what people can do with my own visual conceptions. I love to see how they interpret it and work with it. There's a great article by Graham Locke on the music of Anthony Braxton, and I quote this in several instances within the written essay there. But he mentions that, and I don't know if I'm quoting this very accurately, but he mentions that including improvisatory content in any sort of situation for a performer allows them to bring their own creative facility to the work. This is something that is very important to me. I love Beethoven and all the greats and Haydn, Schubert, Schumann, all this. Uh-huh. I feel, maybe feel is the wrong word, but I strongly believe that in the world that we are in now, and all of the multitude, variety of voices that are now added to the dialogue, the creative dialogues, we're hearing things from people that we otherwise never would have heard from before. I think it's important to, when you can, it's still your work and it's still what you've created and what you've made. It's important to bring in other people's perspectives. It's whenever you can, however small that might be. And it's really interesting when you do that. Live improvisatory collaboration, sort of spur of the moment. What an interesting thing. So getting off the topic a little bit, but graphic scoring is something that I have a passion for because of that reason. In a fuller answer to your question, Mark. I'm sorry, Bob?
It allows for that.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely. It would involve several $1,000s, and it would involve several years of my life to stage this, to really put it up the way that I would want to do it.
It will involve several $1,000s, and it will involve several years of your life. It will happen.
God bless you. God bless you. I sure hope it does.
I'll underwrite your grants, man. I got you.
I will hire you.
Eventually we'll become a nonprofit and, make sure all of our guests get their stuff produced. Anyway.
I'm flattered. So graphic scores, they're there. One of the reasons that they make up such a huge section of this opera is, at the end of the day, maybe the ultimate conclusion is, if it can't be performed, at least it's nice to look at. That's about it.
It's another reason for our listeners to go check this out and follow along.
Yeah, there you go.
And on that note, I'd love to follow through with Bob's original intention, because it's so beautifully fascinating. So we should almost get a little ding, flip the page, ding, at the end of this, go to the next page of that. This score is. You can feel the amount of work, but Bob, take us through a little bit. Let's do we already mentioned briefly the ensemble. So we have two percussionists, two sopranos, and the Blipfert, let's say. So the percussionists are it's the main battery for the bulk of this work, and it's honestly a bit of a standard modern percussion setup. You've got bass drum, low tom, mid tom, snare drum, crash cymbal, splash cymbal, woodblock, triangle, yada yada yada. And it's what's really interesting is that you have two more or less very similar ensembles, but they're supposed to be different. So
correct.
You have one player to play a cowbell, and you go through the specifics of what you're kind of looking for with the cowbell, and then you suggest the other player use alternatives such as an agogo bell or found metal object. And it's similar as you go through it, like the shaker, like a minal shaker for one person, and like a water bottle filled with coins or rice for the other person. Right. And this is, as you said already, giving the dichotomy of the two personalities, I would assume.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. And so, excellent. Excellent point there, Bob. So, I mean, right off the bat, you start to see that the narrative, the characters, the essences of what makes up this work is woven as intimately as possible into every area of what is going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least that's the attempt. It's it's hopefully it reaches something.
Right on. So
Yeah.
the next part of the score is going over the blip forms, which are your
Blip
conducting
forms, yeah.
specialized conducting commands.
I love this part because I feel part of your sense of humor in here, but at the same time, it's like absolutely deadly serious for the conduction of the piece. But it,
right.
People will see what I'm talking about. I hope, but
yeah,
go ahead.
love looking at the image that you have next to point to you and just imagine you going and be like, get in the car. I'm going to activate your dental plan.
Referencing one of the many messages that I've left for you over the years. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Blip forms are my own conception of interpretive conducting, a set of interpretive conducting techniques based off of, and I give a little description of it, of Walter Thompson's sound painting system.
Yeah.
The techniques used by Anthony Braxton again, and Butch Morris, John Zorn to a lesser extent. He more note cards and file cards and all that. But I went through some pretty silly names in trying to find a name for my own system. But blip forms ultimately was perfect because in a blipvert performance, referring to the last interview that we did, there's flailing about and putting arms up and quote unquote dance moves. So there are forms, there are bodily forms, if you like, which are actualized based on the musical dynamics.
Yeah.
And here they are now codified into a system that guides that can be inserted at any point in the written work. So I think that this is a very exciting method of composing and realizing a work, in that, for me, it's exciting for me anyway, in that, okay, now here, at this point in the music drama, I can throw in some general commands. I can throw in some like a drawn out line or a hand explosion or a pulse pattern. Any performative command. One of my favorites, my absolute favorites to do, is the overhand baseball throw.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you throw something, it's like you're throwing something at the performer, you're trying to hit them with something, and it's just this loud explosion of sound.
That's amazing.
And it's just so impactful. Something I'd love to do is I would love to get you and both of you and maybe Jordan's Beak group and do a set with that, or Jordan Glenn, one of our good friends for everybody out there, and a lot of people know Jordan Glenn, but
episode
he has a great
1
group
baby.
called Beak, and episode 1, yeah, right. He's got a great group called Beak, and just getting a whole ensemble together to do a performance of blip forms would be fun.
Well, and that reminds me too, because down here, there's a sentence here: the instrumental ensemble may wish to control this nuance on their own from time to time, which depends on how much control blipvert conductor will wish to relinquish during improvisation. And that to me, you're addressing a specific thing, but that to me does bring to mind that, in our performances at Beak, you were always a little bit of like a Weapon X, and you were never scared to throw out the rules entirely and just like do what needed to be done, regardless of the, generally, we would all make the song work. But there were some times where I look over and I was like, man, Will is just, he's just exploding the game right now. So I imagine that you are prepared for any amount of that to happen in this as well, or at least would accept it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm surprised that Jordan kept bringing me back for gigs, because sometimes sometimes the results of that kind of attitude were not the best did not present the best kind of scenario, but
it's always amazing.
So as not to upstage anybody, it's like you have that destruction of the game, as you said, Mark, and then you let other people do their thing, but as far as that kind of spontaneity is concerned, I just find it very exciting. I find it very unique. I find it very, at least, I mean, not as far as me being unique, but just something that an audience member might find unique, unexpected, unplanned, not premeditated. Something
also,
that
just going back to our discussion, like from before, it's bringing the input from the performer in a live way, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I mean, I've often found if you try to control or plan things too much, it just kind of falls apart and it becomes a little stale and it becomes a little staid. Yeah. So spontaneity is a huge part of this work, really, in all facets, and it's something that I really enjoy seeing and I really enjoy doing with other people. Really, in all kinds of musical situations. The demons take over, unfortunately, in some cases, and I can't help it.
But I really do enjoy the dichotomy on this piece, where you have that amount of allowance for spontaneity, but the work is so huge in the amount of work that you've put into it, but you still relinquish control somehow. It's really cool. Like if I were to personally myself imagine making a music drama or an opera or something, I would imagine that my first inclination would be to notate the whole damn thing and tell everyone exactly what to do, and so this is really inspiring and really, I mean, it's great to be able to see a score up like this,
In some ways, that's the easier thing to do when you're composing, where it's like control everything.
Absolutely.
But then, like this in a lot of ways, and making something like this and making it work is definitely more challenging. I wanted to just maybe talk a bit about a couple of these forms, just so people know what we're talking about. So. And you have a couple, it seems like there's a couple different kinds of things that can happen, because there's like these, what you will call general commands, are almost kind of like meta commands that can happen on top of other commands or in relation to other commands. So like a simple command, like perhaps what you said before, the overhand baseball throw. So you make this motion where you're like throwing a baseball, and that means the performer that you're throwing the baseball to makes as best they can a loud explosion, which quickly fades out. And just kind of to contrast that with like your pinching hands. So you're pinching all over the place pointillistically, and the performer that you're doing this at produces a pointillistic staccato burst of sound kind of all over the place as your hands go. And then you can have a meta command like both hands moving in a circular motion over the top of one another, and that indicates to whomever you're doing this to that they continue the performance cue that you just gave them, right?
Right.
Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it would typically start with a general command. Who is going to be doing the upcoming form? A performative command, and then any sort of attenuated command would happen after that, or adjustment commands. So it's split into three different sections. General, who gets to do what, start and stop, how long it goes, and so forth. Performative, what you're actually going to do. And then during the performative command, if I want to adjust it or attenuate it in any way, volumetrically or within pitch or tempo attenuation, those are included too. And so I should say that if somebody were to take a look at this score, there's a lot to read. And,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, exactly. So that comes out of my study with a guy named Howard Bashaw, who is one of the greatest teachers I think I've ever had, and one of the most amazing composers I think I've ever studied under. And I learned more from him about graphic scores than I think anybody else, and really composition in general. And one of the things that he emphasized very strongly as far as graphic score performances was that you have to be clear. You have to be clear with what you want. Yeah, you could give somebody a picture and just say, go. But if you're going for something, if you're going for a specific thing, you have to be as clear as you possibly can. You have to give people I guess my thing is, I've learned it's bad to assume, really, in any situation. Well, I'm assuming that this person is going to show up on time. I'm assuming that I'm going to get paid at this gig.
Yeah.
Kind of attitude, you know? I'm assuming that, and it's in this situation, really, as a composer, you kind of get into the sense that in a situation such as this, with a work this size, you kind of get into the sense that, and it really, I don't know if this is true for anybody else, but for me, I often get into the mindset of, yeah, I think they really, when they read this, they're really going to understand what's in my brain. They're going to understand what's in my head. And that's totally not the case, right? So what I'm envisioning and wanting them to do, I have to describe as clearly as possible so that they will get as close as possible to what I want. But then again, as you were talking about, Mark, and Bob as well, you can't in a spontaneous situation such as this, or where there is a determined amount of spontaneity, you can't control the outcome. You have to relinquish some control to what is going on. You can get as close as you can to it, but then the spontaneity is what makes it exciting.
Yeah.
And of course, if somebody was going to perform this, or if I was going to give this to somebody, I wouldn't expect them to read the whole thing. I mean, they obviously would read the sections that apply to them. I mean, there's things in here about staging. There's things in here about the MIDI controller to use. But there would be an amount of reading there. But then again, if you were to do a Wagnerian opera or Rossini or anybody like this, it's just sort of a different medium. You just translate the idea of reading a lot of music notes to now reading directions of what to do.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Alvin Lucier-ish, for lack of a better comparison.
I think one of the main differences, though, and this is a question that will become obvious, I think, the more we get into this, is like, what the performance of this piece for the conductor is really, you got to memorize, like, for example, the blip forms, you have 4 pages of that stuff, and potentially more if the conductor wants to add more. In order to pull that off, those have to be memorized and ingrained in the person's
Yeah.
They have to practice that. Like, they're not going to read it on the night, they got to really become you.
Yeah, this is some. Well, there's a great. I can't recommend this highly enough, but there is a wonderful documentary on the composer Milton Babbitt by a guy named Robert Hilferty, who passed away some time ago. Anybody who hasn't seen it, it's just a wonderful doc, and I love listening to Milton Babbitt. Milton Babbitt has the unique talent of making the most boring situations sound like the most illuminating, profoundly interesting occurrence that ever occurred in human history. He's just such a wonderful guy to listen to. Incredibly erudite, very, very well. He's incredible insights into different things, and he just has a very keen mind for sound. Huge fan of Brahms, is one of his favorite composers.
Oh, interesting.
He's no longer with us, but was at Princeton for most of his life. But he had an experience, and he in Boston, I believe it was, and he tells it in the documentary. I'm going to tell you a tale. It sort of sounds like him. I got a good Milton Babbitt impression. He was commissioned to write a piece for the orchestra. It was a string orchestra piece. It's called Transfigured Notes. Take off from Schoenberg there.
Yeah.
And it's such a wonderful, it's insane piece. It's a completely insane piece. Very difficult to play. Because in the documentary, you hear string players talking about what it's like to play the piece. And they say, well, it's a slow tempo, but there's a lot of sustained pitches. So you're kind of swimming in this whole thing. You have to come in maybe a beat and a half or a beat and a 16th after the violas, and you have to really be on it. You have to really study this score. You have to practice it. It has to be rehearsed. One of the first successful performances of this piece was by Gunther Schuller, who Milton Babbitt was very fond of. And Gunther Schuller is just the man. I mean, he's quoted in the documentary as saying, well, when I hear people say, well, this piece is unplayable, I go, let's go play it. I love that enthusiasm and that energy that he has towards new music, particularly. And so Milton Babbitt I'm quoting Milton Babbitt or paraphrasing him from the documentary. I wasn't there. This isn't my piece, but this is pretty much what he says. He enters the hall, and when he sent the score to the performers and the conductor, they said, this looks so straightforward and simple to do. We're not going to have any problem with it. We're going to read it straight down. So he shows up at the hall. The conductor comes in, and he doesn't introduce Milton. Milton Babbitt's sitting in the hall. He doesn't introduce him to the orchestra, and Milton Babbitt goes, "This is unforgivable, as everyone knows." And so he starts to conduct the piece, and they stop after a minute or so, and violence raises his hands. He goes, I don't know where we are. And so it's this constant back and forthing. They stop. They don't know. They lose their place. They don't. And it was Milton Babbitt basically said it was more or less a disaster. It was not a well rehearsed piece.
Wait,
and
was
so
this
they didn't perform
in a performance or rehearsal?
This was in a rehearsal.
Oh, okay.
A rehearsal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were going to perform it, but they just wound up axing it.
Oh my God!
So
they cut it entirely.
I believe they cut the whole thing entirely from this first premiere performance, so they never did it. And so Milton Babbitt's talking to the conductor afterwards, and he goes, "Look, why did you do this if you couldn't pull it off?" And the conductor goes, "Well, I thought I could." And so going back to I think, Mark, what you said about, or no, Bob, you said about you have to know the Blitform's commands. You have to study.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This also attempts to remedy something that I find somewhat distasteful when it comes to playing other people's music. And I've had this experience before. I had this actually when I was very young, and I always kind of said to myself, well, okay, I've got something to learn from this, but if they're not learning anything from it, then really, why am I here? You got to go study it. You got to go rehearse this. You got to go memorize it to a certain degree. If you need a cue sheet or whatever it is.
Yeah.
This is, I suppose, to put it colloquially, we're trying to do something cool here. We're trying to, I'm trying to execute something here. I don't want people showing up and just kind of winging it. That's not what this work is about. And you're not going to do that with a Wagnerian opera. You're not going to do that with a Beethoven symphony. You have, even, with Beethoven or Bach even, you have to go home. Yo-Yo Ma, I believe, said that it wasn't until very late in his career that he finally believed that he could execute the Bach cello suites at that moment, right? After he had studied and performed and had this long career of cello performance and study. Now he could finally play Bach. Glenn Gould became obsessed. Glenn Gould never felt that he could play it as perfect as it deserved to be played. Glenn Gould was, completely, it almost drove him insane when it came to this stuff. So this speaks to a discipline and a practice of, if you're going to put something on in sort of the Gunther Schuller sense, let's go do it. Let's not pussyfoot around. Let's actually go and do it. Now that's, of course, a very easy thing to say. very difficult and very different when, hey, Bob and Mark and Crystal and everybody, and Mark, and Sarah and everybody, I want all of you to be involved in putting this on, but I can't pay you anything, right?
Yeah.
And that only goes so far.
Yeah.
So if I had a budget of $20,000 and I could pay everybody a living and or livable wage for a few months, it becomes different.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been in many different situations that deal with that, and there's different models of dealing with that. You get some funding, and you get some sponsorship, and I've had some cool experiences where people are able to promise a certain amount for a rehearsal, and it's nothing like you landing a job at an orchestra, but also I've been in situations where I deeply believe in the music, and and you do everything that you can to make it happen. But I find that as I get older and older, I expect myself and my anyone who's having me on, it's more the expectation that you will get paid for your service, even if it's just a little bit, like, you're going to get a little something for rehearsal or this and that. But shoot, what was I had something that I wanted to really get at in what you were saying there.
Should we start over?
Fantastic time. No, okay. Well, sorry. I sort of lost myself in that thought, but it's shoot. Okay, I'll come back to that. It will come back to me.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think it's important to realize that it can happen, and there are resources to do it. And I feel like as I get older and experience music on larger scales and have participated in more modern opera companies recently, especially, it's the resources are there. It's just like at some point you sort of have to play that game as well.
Right.
And that wasn't my original point, but it's one worth mentioning, to you specifically, because I want this to be staged and I want Bob and I to play it. So
yes, I would love for both of you to play it. I really would. I mean,
I'm scared to play
you've
this
probably
piece,
seen,
man.
Mark, there's vibraphone all over the place and marimba.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah.
This is an intimidating piece.
We got it.
Well, it's
that's what it was about. It was about practicing. Yeah. Anyway, let's go on.
With people like yourself, I don't think it would be hard to put on. I mean, it would be. You'd have to have, obviously competent players. You'd have people who just, generally understand what is going on here. I don't think it would be, after a while, once you actually get going, as with any piece, you ultimately
figure it out.
Yeah, you ultimately figure it out. And you ultimately find a groove. Probably the first thing that's going to happen is maybe trying to record, it's taking a day and just trying to record some of these movements.
Yeah.
And just making a recording out of the whole thing before an actual full-on performance does take place.
Yeah. That's a good call.
So let's keep pressing on here. There's still a lot to get through.
Yeah.
And I want to get into the actual music. We're still in the I guess the preface part.
Right.
So the next little bit is the blip clip. Which is a graphic notation symbol. And so in reading this, I'm actually not 100% sure what you want with this, but you say you want the performer to improvise with frenetic energy and intensity. And then, there's a lot of like incorporating emotive content, improvising, attempting to mimic electronic textures, gestural accompaniment to the performance music material. So this seems like it could be a lot of things.
Sure. Suggestions presented to people.
And then also, we'll get to this in just a second. So this is coded by the Numis colors as well.
Numis streams, yeah.
So when this symbol comes up, do you want it to be like an explosion of improvisation, or do you really want it to be like a kind of open symbol, or how does this actually, what do you want from this symbol?
That's a great question. I give a little YouTube clip there for somebody who wants to see, as I think going back to what you said earlier, Mark, or maybe it was Bob, to see a Blipvert performance. There it is, Bob, right there. Yeah. How do you behave when this symbol does appear? There you go. You've got it right there. Right. So there's a suggestion there. Really. So it's a graphic symbol, and I attempt to give as many directions to a person as far as performing this symbol without giving it away completely, because emotive content is going to mean different things to different people. Explosion of activity is going to mean different things to different people. People are going to do things that I am not going to expect at all, and it's going to be just incredible to see what people pull out of their own heads in order to interpret this symbol the way I want it to be interpreted. It is definitely part of the next little section. And again, we don't have to go through every single section of this, because, it would just take too long.
I want to go through these first bits so that we can understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, like exactly, right, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Well, the Pneuma Stream exposition, which is the next major part, which is my own attempt at creating a new kind of notation, color notation.
Yeah. So this is pretty intense in terms of
this. As a matter of fact, what I've considered doing is creating a series of pieces which just feature this. And as a person will see, you've got several different kinds of master emotions. It's based on emotion. One of the
there's 11 total.
There's 11 total.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go endless. There's endless color shades, but you've got to sort of be conservative a little bit, and you have to stop the process at some point. But
yeah. Can I just read? Let me just read them off.
Yeah, please do.
So like teal is surprise. Violet is disgust, indigo is contempt, gold excitement, ruby or pink is romance, sexual desire, chartreuse is empathic pain, green is fear, etc. And so these are then broken down in numerous ways from there, because you have those are the base colors, and then you have the shading, which indicates the amount of the emotion.
Right,
so like for blue, which is sadness, then you have dark blue, which is like grief, so like extreme sadness, and then light blue, which is melancholy, which is like an extreme version of the emotion versus a light version of that emotion.
Correct. And then, as you see, on top or beyond the extreme version of the emotion is a darkened area, which I state that there's a devotion to like an extreme nuance above, like, let's just take anger, one of my favorites. You've got the lower end of the spectrum, which is irritated, and then you've got the upper end of the spectrum, which is fury.
Yeah.
So what's beyond fury, right? So there's a mania to pile on to that whenever you see a real dark red, and that just would send it into the stratosphere, so to speak. This is meant to first of all, it's meant to it is meant to show and demonstrate the so again, going back to the overarching story, this is meant to capture as intimately as possible the numerous amount of emotional states and emotional qualities that Lady Dice goes through, staring at herself constantly alone in a palace. And you can imagine I don't know if anybody can imagine it, but I think if someone were to imagine it, being isolated for such a long period of time in a palace of mirrors and ultimately hallucinating an alter ego for yourself, you can imagine the myriad of emotional qualities that one would go through over that period of time and how that would affect them. And so this is meant to capture that. But then again, this is something that is also subjective. It is not, a person could interpret this literally throughout the entire work, or they could use they could interpret maybe one or two emotions that really appeal to them, and I describe this later on, or they could use the pneuma streams that do appear as their own emotional, musical emotional points of inspiration. And so this is really where the pneuma stream does kind of take hold, or at least I would hope it would take hold. Pneuma, the idea of a pneuma stream is actually a biblical reference. So the idea, the spirit streams, if you like. I really, and it's discussed in the paper quite heavily. This is another way, if I'm working with an ensemble, or if I were to be working with an instrumentalist, to draw out emotional impact, visceral energy, the inner spirit, the inner passion, if you like, emotional, instrumental, musical passion from a performer as distinctly as possible. And I also, if the next page goes into how the pneuma streams appear. If they appear as angular. Yeah.
This is the one.
This actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This was the page where I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can play this piece.
Yeah.
Because you have.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So this needs some work, to be quite frank. I mean, this is something that I spent a lot. Like there was about a 3 to 4 day period when I just didn't sleep because I was trying to think, okay, so emotions. I was very fascinated by the work of Robert Plutchik, who is I'm not sure what exactly he was. He was a researcher, a psychologist. I believe he's an academic, but a psychologist. He is the person who has done the foremost work on, or at least foremost research, foremost work on emotions, right? And there's something called the Plutchik color wheel, or the Plutchik emotion color wheel.
How do you spell that?
Plutchik? Plutchik.
Okay.
Plutchik, yeah.
The Plutchik color wheel?
The Plutchik color wheel, that's it. And so this is what inspired me to include such a thing into this work. And this section right here, it almost gets it, but it's just not quite there, and it needs some work. Because essentially right here, what I'm asking people, I'm essentially instructing people how to behave, right? Essentially instructing people how to feel, which directly correlates to the idea of pneuma, or a pneuma stream, as a spirit, as the biblical kind of, the Holy Spirit, not to get too, not to proselytize or to get, too religious or into an area of religiosity that we don't need to get into. But the idea of drawing into a person's most intimate emotional facilities that you can bring out in the creative work and make it an unforgettable experience. That's ultimately what I was trying to achieve here. It may be a thing that has to be cut and just is put in as kind of a suggestive idea. However, if you go to the second movement, the Lady's Lament, you start to see these pneuma streams all over the place.
Yeah.
And people might, if they don't read this, they would say, okay, well, I don't know what that is. I don't know what to do here. I don't know what these mean.
Yeah.
This at least attempts to explain it.
They just play squigglies.
Yeah. Basically,
yeah.
So sort of the three main distinctions that you give here. So the first distinction is transparency versus opaqueness.
Correct.
Now this seems now correct me if I'm wrong, similar but not exactly aligned to the opaqueness of the color, or is it actually the same thing?
It's actually the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So and one it's like when I start to actually take a step back and think about this, asking a person to concentrate not only on this but also written material. Now the interesting thing here is that there's not a whole heck of a lot of rhythm of written musical material, except maybe the Lady's Lament, that a person has to specifically concentrate on. There's a great deal of opportunity to focus specifically on these pneuma streams and incorporate emotional dynamism, if you like, into what it is that you're doing musically. There's a lot of opportunity to kind of recontextualize a person's engagement with the score. Again, item 409 on my to-do list is to go back and rework this, and maybe the colors are just enough. This also, I also talk about this in the paper, which is that it ultimately becomes a kind of option.
Well,
when I actually sat down to think about it, I'm like, well, we're kind of getting into militantly fascist territory here, where I'm asking people to behave a certain, like, you have to behave this way, which kind of which kind of contradicts a little bit the spontaneity, asking people to bring their own uniqueness to a performance. So
I would argue that, just because you give them an emotional realm in which they can inhabit that they're going to interpret that how they would. They could never interpret it the way that you would, and therefore they would never play what you would in that instance, and it will still be them. So I don't know.
And another way to interpret it is, I'm giving you the maximum amount of you and how you want to be within this. So that could be,
you gotta get ready for some like confessions and some crazy stuff during rehearsal where you're like, well, they got to go to jail now, man. We got to find a new player.
Well, this is look, this is where it's at for me, man. I mean, live for me. I don't know. Live that way or don't live. I mean, I am personally. I have to. Not soapbox here, but it's like, just another historical example. There's a wonderful futurist opera. I'm a huge fan of the Russian futurists, painters, and it's called Victory Over the Sun. And this, in the time that it was composed, is just such a lovely work. It's insane. It's completely insane. And then, of course, I also came across Oscar Schlemmer's Bauhaus ballets. The Triadic Ballet is just one of my favorite things that's ever been conceived. What you start to see, and going back to the historicity of something behind something like this, what you start to ultimately see, and it's like, I wonder where this kind of stuff went. Maybe other people wonder this as well. This is also maybe perhaps referencing Scott Timberg's book a little bit and what he laments about in his book. But you start to see a unapologetic, is probably the best way to say it, commitment to the work. If other people don't like it, or if it's ostracized from mainstream society, the Bauhaus, of course, was shut down by the Nazis, but so that's, you got the, a little bit of a different thing there, but it's like, to have that kind of commitment, to have that kind of integrative devotion, I guess, to a work from start to finish, and to present it in such a way to where the audience feels as though they are as they're in the work, they're immersed. This idea of artistic immersion in the character's emotions, immersion in the action, immersion in the story, immersion in the interplay between the conductor and the instrumentalist, and the instrumentalists and the people and the sopranos, and then all of a sudden you start to notice this immersive aspect of everyone. This isn't about that. You start to notice that the conductor is actually part of the ensemble. This is. I wonder where this kind of stuff went, and that's just me. I mean, maybe I'm just completely. Maybe I don't go outside enough. I don't know, but. These kinds of works and the sorry, go ahead.
Well, you're bringing up a fucking shitstorm of things that could be brought up about that. I mean, the easiest thing to point towards is very small amounts of content that people consume and the need for likes, and then also the fear of rejection on the same thing, but also Oofta. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I don't even really want to crack open right now because, you know, in terms of creating your own culture, that's a really tricky thing.
Yeah.
Right now,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And like to be totally original and confident in that. And, yeah. So I hear what you're saying, but that's like it's a huge thing that you're grappling with. And so if this is your, you know, your offering to that, and that's amazing, you know?
Right. Well, I just wonder how many more dubstep DJs we need. Right. I mean, I'm wondering how much more EDM.
One more. Always.
You're absolutely right.
Just kidding, man.
So, okay, just to finish up with this NumaStream page. So, you have the transparency versus the opaqueness, which is going to correspond to what we've already discussed. So the depth of the emotion you're feeling, euphoria versus just mere contentment. Then the other thing is the sort of the cohesion of the shape that you're seeing. So like a solid line is definitive to the emotion versus like sporadic dots or light shaded lines. You have an unstable or loose commitment to the emotion somehow. And then the last one is the you say intensity and dynamism, position on the staff plus activity shape. So this is like almost two separate things. So here you're considering the place on the staff, or I guess on some cases this would be the staff is just the page, if like right. So, and then you're like, as an example, you're comparing like edged corners versus rounded corners for a shape that's going up and down. So, and then this is basically reflecting how smoothly you're changing back and forth in your emotional state.
Exactly.
Which is, honestly, I mean, even if just this alone,
so
like,
as you can see,
I don't even know how to approach this on the instrument. You know, I feel like you could almost write. You should, or like, in order to be able to play this piece, I would want to play a book of etudes about each of these ideas.
Yeah, you see, and there you go, Bob, because that right there is exactly what I it's item 151 on the to-do list is like.
Oh, we were just at 49, I believe.
Right. Oh yeah. Whoops. Yeah. Skipped over a few, but the to compose a suite of pieces for such an ensemble, to interpret, amongst these conditions is something that I think would be very special. That being said, when you say it's like, wow, I don't know how to approach this, that's exactly the kind of attitude that you should have, because let's say you were hired to do this, right? And let's say I wanted to do it absolutely to a T. Like, for example, if I was to do this the first time, again, this section may completely be axed because it's enough to just get it off the ground as is. But let's say I wanted to reincorporate this whole thing into the process.
Yeah.
That's your attitude right there is exactly the kind of attitude one should have. Because it's like, I have no idea, so I'm going to dive in. And I'm going to try my best. I'm going to dive in. Obviously, what you're seeing, or what a person should see in this particular case, is like, wow. I mean, I have to spend some time with this. Going back to what we were talking about before, I've got to spend some time coming up, and effectively, what you would be doing is you would be creating your own personality. You're creating a performative personality to be integrated into this work specifically. You're no longer Bob Ledoux. You are a person, you're somebody else completely. It's almost like you're creating your own alter ego to be, so now we're back to how this weaves as intimately as it can into the narrative, into the work itself. So by absorbing yourself within emotion, again, the actual interpretive features there I have to work on, and maybe the colors are just enough. But by absorbing yourself in this material, you become effectively a different person.
Or at least a person that can read the score.
That's right. And if that's all you became, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, isn't that kind of what happens with just reading regular music? Kind of, yeah. This takes it to a completely different place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like with practice in general too. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. If you have regular practice, it is
right.
it will change you over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it changes how you feel and approach life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
At least for me,
right.
But especially something like this. This is not just like, all right, put on the metronome and go through it and learn it.
Mm-hmm.
This is This is almost a form of self-therapy in a way, because you're like, all right, cool. How am I gonna let's see, I'm gonna channel my most extreme emotions in this performance. It's more like acting in that way, huh? That's interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's an excellent point, Mark. There's a huge theatrical component to this. This is not get on stage, read the score, and go home. I mean, this is, as I said, going back to what Bob had alluded to. You are asked to make a much deeper commitment to something like this,
right?
If you decide to take it on, and I don't know. I mean, I'm extraordinarily inspired. I think we talked about him last interview, but Charles Mingus, I'm extraordinarily inspired by the amount of energy that he would elicit from his band, and the requirements that he would have for his band. Look, if you're going to play in this band, you're going to give 180% every single night. I don't want hacks in here. I don't want, hired guns in here. So this is something that, and again, it only goes so far if I have no way to compensate people for their time.
Right.
But then again, going back to what you said as a rejoinder to that, Mark, it's like, well, okay, money is fine and we all need to eat. But then again, you specifically, or anybody having a sort of belief, I like what you said there, belief in the work. Yeah, okay, so this is something deep, and I don't quite know what it is. And Bob's going, I have no idea how to interpret this. So you take it home and you have to study the score for a month, maybe. And then you come back and you have a completely unique, and this is what really excites me. It's like, if you or both of you were to take this score away and study it and really get into the pneuma streams, you could get into it, or we could axe it, but whatever, or whoever was going to perform this, you'd come back in a month a completely different person.
Yeah.
Ready to give ready to give a very intimate part of yourself to this, and that is where the collaborative effect of the collaborative nature, if you like, each person, as I mentioned before, bringing their own unique persona into the work, right? It makes the work far more, in my opinion anyway, immersive, because what the audience is then witnessing is a variety of unique voices, a diversity of voices, rather than just, oh, okay, so this is Beethoven, right? Beethoven is amazing, and I would never put myself next to a guy like that, but now we have a plurality of creative constructs rather than one definitive voice that is kind of overseeing everything. I mean, I am the voice that is kind of commanding and creating the work, and I've created the work and all that. But then I also want to hear what Bob has to say. And Bob makes his own voice evident throughout by interpreting the score in such a way. And Mark does the same thing, and whoever else is involved does the same thing that way.
Right on.
Yeah.
Man. So
I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's
it does. Absolutely.
Good.
So a couple more points of the pneuma stream to consider. You mentioned blocks, which are basically, it looks like you're considering like a gradient or a solid colored block as like,
yeah, exactly.
And so this is the content of the passage is defined by a singular construct.
Right.
So if you see basically a blue gradient, then everything that happens inside of that box is going to be some type of sadness.
Correct.
Depending on what it looks like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you discuss warps, which are the where the actual notated material is physically bent or
stressed. Yeah.
Like upside down looking, bent or however. And so this is such warps. I'll just read it here. Such warps are meant to encourage dramatic movement in accordance with the notated material. Such movement may include, but is not limited to, whole body movement across the stage, dramatic expressions utilizing hands and arms, fluid or flowing upper torso movements, crouching and shaking. So, really getting into the stage performance aspect of it here. And interestingly, so like this doesn't directly correspond to an emotion, but perhaps expressing. So like if you see, let's say you're in sadness and you see your notation bending upwards, you're expressing sadness then, and you are physically required to express this notation.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting it.
We're
getting through it, man.
See, it's not that hard, right?
Yeah.
So it's but this involves it involves discussion with the director. It involves discussion with your partner. Maybe you, Bob, would be playing with a tuned percussion player, or you'd handle both tuned percussion and pitch percussion, and non-pitch percussion. And then discussing it with Mark, who's the other percussion player. Okay, so what are we going to do here? What do you have here? What do you have here? It becomes a collaborative effect. And this is something that is important to me. I mean, I've spent so long doing Blitvert on my own. I mean, I also do band, I play in a number of bands, and I do this and do a number of things, but collaboratively and working together, I find that this is essential for works in the modern era. I find it's essential. The antiquated notion of the composer who is kind of aloof and sort of off in the shadows in the concert hall, and everybody else is sort of left to figure it out. That just doesn't really fly with me. I want to be an active participant. I want to hear what Mark has to say. I want to hear, and I'm using the both of you because you're right here. But this could apply to anybody.
Yeah.
But I want to hear what X person has to say and Y person has to say. And
we're just your average Mark and your average Bob.
You're the average Bob, average Mark, right?
Yeah.
Both of whom I love very much. But at the end of the day, it's like this collaborative effort. Based on interpreting the nuances that I have drawn out and designed is really, I think, what can make it special.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess even slightly related to that, in the special considerations section here, it seems like you're asking the performers to basically consider the piece as a whole while considering the emotions. So as the piece, like considering there's like the micro emotional state, and then you're basically, it seems like you're saying there's going to be macro emotional shifts as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's sort of, it follows a kind of Wagnerian conception of how he interpreted composition, and the idea that harmony, these very stacks and stacks of chromatic harmony is sort of built from the ground up, providing a foundation for the melody, right? So it's this kind of complex it's this edifice of tones that provides a grounding up, I think he calls it in one of his writings, for the melody to come into its fullest expression over a determined period of time. You might interpret what I say here in a similar fashion. Everything we've been talking about up until now is an attempt to draw into or enter into psychological states as intimately as possible.
Right.
Yeah. And ultimately you see that come out in the performances. you go away with the score for a month or 2 months, and you come back, as I said, a changed person, and you are integrating a very unique psychological condition into the work itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe even responding to what the performers are doing too, and then all of a sudden you've got basically a free jazz jam. To a degree.
Yeah, but if you're not crying at the end of rehearsal, you need to hit the practice room.
Yeah, yes. Yes,
Oh, man.
yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to make people cry. That's it.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to do that. But
No, I kid, but so in the last bit here, you basically are. It seems like this is actually. It seems like such a critical thing that you're saying here, but it's about interpreting the score, and it seems like you're saying a given performer might read, like you can select, I'm going to read this single emotion on the page, and another performer might choose to read the combined, because once we get into the score, there's a lot of emotions that may be happening for a part. So so then it really becomes a score in the sense that one performer may choose to read one bit of it, and another performer may choose to read another bit of it. Or
I would absolutely love it if somebody tried this at some point, trying to interpret everything. That to me would be a dream come true. Just seeing a lead character, seeing a soprano, like the Lady Dice lead character, just try to interpret all pneuma streams as directly as possible based on the instructions. That would be.
I'd be curious from here, actually, for those following along in your read along storybook from the download, because you have a bunch of extremely fascinating stuff about like the electronics incorporation. But we talked a little bit about that, and it'd be really cool if we could maybe go forward now to some of the score, Bob. I don't know what you think about that, and discuss
let's cover the electronics just a bit. Just
a bit, but I mean we're fresh on it right now, and just to like look at what the actual pneuma streams look like within the score as well is mind-boggling. So, but yes,
there are almost like 20 more pages of preface.
I understand.
Like it's not just the electronics. But
no, I know, but I'm
honestly, let me just maybe we could come back to some of the details again. But let's briefly just cover everything that's here, and then we can dive into the score bit.
Cool.
Sure.
Does that work?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so yeah, go ahead. And I can.
Okay, so
the next section would be electronics and what to do with all of the electronic material.
Yep.
Right. So it's the main brain here is a laptop, and you give multiple options for setups, right?
Yeah.
So, and multiple options for the type of all the different hardware you can use, and but in essence, it's basically it has to be on the fingertips of the conductor, the Blipford,
right?
And
and another reason for all of this this oratory here throughout each one of the sections is this was a thesis project, so there had to be a lot of writing, right?
Yeah,
there had.
Sure.
I mean, this was required. I mean, if I didn't have, I was ultimately had to defend this, right? So it didn't have to be performed, strangely enough, but I had to defend this, and so it's like if I didn't have something explained to a certain degree, well, okay, this doesn't make sense because how are you going to pull this off? Are you going to? And I was very pleased in that everybody found it convincing. There were some questions and there was some this, and a person said, "Well, if you're going to perform this, I mean, this is going to require a lot from people." I go, "That's exactly the point." I mean, every work requires a lot from people. This requires just as much. But there's different dimensions of concentration, or interpretation, reading parts as well as notated material. But yeah, electronics and integration, and I also give links to the electronic tracks, and I talk about if you're going to use a laptop, you can use a mixer in this case, types of MIDI controllers to use, types of monitor setups to use.
Yeah,
that's ultimately up to the ultimately up to the person's own interpretation is how they want to do it. And then, of course, I also go through what kinds of files I've included. And this, of course, is also notated in the score. You have them there, Bob?
Yeah, I was gonna give it.
yeah. Please play some of them. Yeah.
I'll just give it like a little playthrough of maybe each of them, and then
sure,
just to get an idea of what we have here.
Cool.
These are cool. I forgot what they sounded like.
So these are to be then manipulated by the performer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, they're at least in my opinion interesting little vignettes of loops, if you like, which are to be manipulated by the conductor in certain scenes and in certain situations. And each little collection of sound files, which are able to be downloaded, and I think they're actually free. Some rights reserved. I mean, people can take it and manipulate it on their own if they want. Hence the idea of somebody taking this and performing it on their own as a work. If somebody wanted to take it on. But with something like this, you take these and you manipulate, you improvise, however extremely or non-extremely you want to do it. You just let the loop play. The loops are weird enough to where they have enough character and energy without having to be manipulated. But if if a person wanted to manipulate it, they could do that too.
Yeah, I mean, you even just triggering them in your own way, like any type of manipulation, right? You get to know the material and you get to play it.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
Correct. For one of my pieces, I had like these kind of remind me a little bit like sonically of the I had it was like audio files to be triggered by a 3-piece ensemble. And it's like it's nice. It's like it's always nice to have, but then like you have it so they can be triggered like these can't be triggered at any time. They have. So wait, I'm looking at this. Are there more files than what I have here? Or is that it?
Oh, there's much more, yeah. Okay. There's much more.
Okay,
yeah.
I must have... Oh, I guess I downloaded it, like the one scene.
Yeah, I think you took the one, yeah, because as I describe in the electronics and integration section, there are several...
Oh yeah, you specify how many electronic wave files.
Right.
So like
I think
scene
how many files
23,
do you have there? Yeah.
Scene 2 contains 7, scene 3 contains 20, scene 4 contains 7, and scene 5 contains 10.
Mm-hmm.
Dang.
Yeah.
It uses colorizations throughout the scene. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so some are meant to be used specifically in specific parts in coordination with the percussion, and some are meant to just colorize, interestingly, the scene itself.
Yeah. Very cool. So
Yeah.
then
yeah.
the next bit is this staging schematic.
Yep, staging schematic, which is purely. Oh yeah,
sorry. Real quick though. I mean, as much as I was like gunning to get to the score, I really do appreciate just looking at your laptop setup for double laptop, single laptop, and self-contained setup. It's just, for me personally, it's fascinating, and I appreciate that you included all that as well as all your all the triggering, possibilities, like down to Akai APC MK2 or anything like that. This is a very fun geek out page for me. So thank you for including.
Oh sure, yeah. Well, thanks for saying that, Mark. Yeah, this is meant to, as clearly as possible, give a person some guide as to how they might incorporate the electronics from a live perspective, if they're going to take on the role of directing the piece into the work as a whole.
And it might give a little glimpse into how you approach your own live setups in general. But so anyway, back to staging schematic. So this is fascinating.
It's mostly straightforward. You have the placement of the individual parties and their setups, but then you also have these arrows, which are these like basically the runway for where they can move around to?
Yeah.
So
exactly. So so for example, if you see the blue arrows right there, the percussion battery can be placed at any stage along, like for the non-elevated black box theater style, moving it closer towards the stage, or moving it towards the back of the black box, and then of course the yellow arrows are meant to show the kinds of places that the sopranos can move throughout the entire work, even beyond the conductor, going into almost into the audience, so to speak. So that is exactly what that's meant to represent. And then for theaters with an elevated stage, as you can see here, there's a little more restricted movement because you're dealing with an elevated stage as opposed to a more integrated, flattened stage where now, with an elevated stage, you've got more or less a barrier between the audience and the performers.
Right. So to continue with this, you have the lighting. You have the beginning of some lighting suggestions, which I think get more elaborate later on. The suggestions given are what we consider ideal lighting for each scene. So the lighting director really becomes a part of this. I feel like. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, the costuming person, the person who designs the stage scenery.
Yeah.
The person who does the lighting. I kind of miffed it a little bit. On the stage scenery, a mirror palace, a stage full of mirrors would not probably work because if you've got lighting going on, that's going to reflect a direct glare to the audience. So that might not be it. But maybe it could be arranged in such a way to where, reflections would not appear towards the audience. But then you got to watch it with the performers so that you don't blind them, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. It could be maybe some kind of soft lighting, or I don't know.
Exactly.
Or you could even set up something where there's like a little video camera that just has a projection of whatever's right in there.
There's numerous, different kinds of images of Lady Dice, going off of different surfaces, just kind of shifting around. There'd be a way to solve it very easily.
And the costuming is you indicate interestingly steampunk with 18th century or futurist with formal business attire. So you want something. Do you want something reflective of like? I mean, I guess it's just you want someone to be inventive with this, but do you want it to?
Of course, yeah.
Do you want it to be this sort of like combination of two traditions or ideas or whatever?
Absolutely. When then we get to the dichotomy between the two characters, right?
Yeah.
So
okay.
you have somebody in a kind of a futurist tunic garb, and then you've got somebody on the other side of the stage in a very formal business suit. You have, say, medieval kinds of garb with I don't know, maybe some sort of hip hop attire or something. I mean, this is.
Yeah.
This is again something that draws directly into the dichotomy between the two characters, and furthermore the emotional perturbances that each of them experience on a completely separate level, even though they are the same person. This is about alter egos. This is about perhaps all of the people we imagine ourselves to be on a daily basis, or that we wish we would be, or that we wish we weren't.
Yeah, absolutely.
This I think speaks to that very, as far as making any sort of psychological and or psychosocial, if you like, connection with any audience member. That's probably the closest comparison.
Yeah,
or the closest connection.
Yeah. So the next bit is just the libretto, right?
Yep.
And,
textual content there, and gives the syllabic utterances and the actual words for all the scenes.
Right. And then it goes on to, all right, so the graphic scoring rationale. This is
talking about why this is a music drama scored with graphic scores.
Right. Which we've kind of talked about this already.
On the textual content stuff, that I feel like some of this goes back to what we were talking about in the last interview for scene 3 and the chant for disassociative calm, and scene 4. There's some of this like interesting callback to like, I don't know, MIDI scat. In a way, there's something in there, but anyway, not to get hung up on that. I just there's a lot of you in here, and there's a little bit more of it right there.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And it was a lot of fun to come up with this with this stuff. I wanted to make it interesting and not pretentious.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome.
Maybe this whole thing is pretentious, but.
Yeah, so,
you're just inviting people to look at themselves, man. It's all good.
Hey, there you go. I hope so.
Yeah. So we've talked about your graphic scoring rationale. I feel like already a little bit. And then after this, you give your acknowledgments and your dedications.
That's right. Yep.
And we've mentioned some of these people already. But there's more people on here that you don't mention. You mentioned Georgi Ligeti.
Ligeti, yeah, Ligeti. He's up there, yep. And this kind of draws into a little bit of this whole work. You take a look at it. I mean, what in the heck is this? Getting into kind of Bertolt Brecht theater of the absurd. Ligeti's Le Grand Macabre. His opera, which is just a complete freak show. It's so great.
I actually have not checked that out as much as I love Ligeti.
It's really something. Really something. Yeah.
Fascinating.
That as well as Adventures and New Adventures, which are completely improvised pieces, if I'm not mistaken.
Nouvelle, is that?
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I've listened to I have like a Deutsche Grammophon CD set, and I think some of that is on there, and it's like, there's a lot of Ligeti that I know really well, and I can just sit down and take on, and the bagatelles and all the string quartets and all that, and then like sometimes like the Nouvelle Adventures, I think I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah,
this is wild. But anyway,
it's
digress,
insane.
man.
Yep.
So the next bit of the score is the symbols that the conductor will use.
Exactly, right. Yep.
For later on.
Symbols, yep.
And
symbols for each of the movements. Yep.
So we get to those later, and then we're almost to the actual music. So
Right.
And so then we're at the prelude, and I'm curious why you reiterate the instrumentation here.
Because it changes from scene to scene. So this would be. So, for example, in the prelude, this is what both percussionists would be using, and in the second one, it's just a way to prepare people for the upcoming.
So, just I guess
for what they're going to use. Yeah.
They have the same instrumentation in this one. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. All instrumentation would be, and there's no written parts for the percussion here. It's all based off of blip forms and what commands the conductor would choose to incorporate throughout the electronic track.
So, in this case, you do not want do you not want those other instruments to be even on the stage, like the vibraphone and marimba, or?
Oh no, they're there again. It's just a way to. This is what is typically done. If I'm not, at least this is what I've seen done. At the very beginning of a score, listing the kinds of instruments that are being used. But for me, it changes from scene to scene. And so for me, it's just a way of preparing, as I said, each percussionist for what is to come, right?
Yeah.
So some scenes you're going to use pitch percussion, some you're going to use non-pitch percussion, and it's very specific the way that the percussion is played and the way the percussion is utilized. Because and henceforth you have to kind of be oriented towards a specific area of your percussion setup in order to make it work.
Yeah, that's definitely true in like multi-movement things that I've done with symphonies, but especially musicals where you have to have a lot of like quick scene to scene change, and it just gives you a real quick rundown, or like that beautiful word tacit. But like
word test.
In that particular
Well,
context,
again, Mark, more to your point, I've learned not to assume, so it's like, hey, Mark, here's the score. Okay, boom. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing in this scene. I know what I'm doing here. I know what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
I read the entire, God forbid, I read the whole thing, and
I have some notes on your thesis.
Yeah.
Right.
And here we go. Let's rehearse.
Right. And now I don't want to see Will ever again. Right?
So this next bit is something that we see a couple times throughout the score. This seems like to me this is just setting the mood for the performers. Is that a good interpretation of this next page?
Oh yeah, right. So exactly. So one finds their way into the mirror palace of Lady Dice through a labyrinth of synesthetic tapestries. The lady is eventually revealed as a psychological enigma whose personality is illuminated via protean moods, textures, images, and timbres. And so that is basically meant to draw, exactly as you said, Bob, draw somebody into the piece.
But the audience doesn't get to perceive this bit. This is just for the performers.
Not necessarily. This is strictly for the performers. Yep, okay. Strictly for the performers. Now, of course, somebody could choose to. I would absolutely advocate somebody taking this as like a slide, to put up and demonstrate to the audience or show before the scene actually began.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting.
That would be something.
Are you? I'm surprised I haven't thought of this. Are you envisioning that the audience sees the score during the performance?
Well, that's another thing. So scrolling down, we're going past performance directions and specifics.
Yep.
So really quickly, performance directions and specifics. These are meant. It's different for each scene, and they're meant to give. In very specific terms. Now we get to the actual directions of the graphic score, directions on how to interpret the graphic scores for each member of the ensemble. Both percussionists, for example, third point down, will adhere solely to the blip forms commands facilitated by blip conductors. So, for example, as I said before, there's no written percussion material. You're going to follow the conductor specifically, right? Percussion will serve as an intermittent coloring in support of the main tape track, right? So, again, I'm going through and I'm describing as clearly and as specifically and as much in detail as I can everything that is going on here, so that when you read the score, you're not going to be wondering what the hell is going on. You'll have questions later on as to more specific things.
Yeah.
again, this is probably my own insecurity and just like, okay, I don't want people coming in. One of my biggest fears as a composer, I had a incredibly penetrating experience with something like this when I was in Korea a few years ago. In that we were offered the opportunity to write a work for one of the Korean musical ensembles. One of some members of the orchestra, actually, of the Gugak Center, where I had the opportunity to study for a little while. And none of these people spoke English, right? So the challenge was, I'm sorry?
Was it cipher notation or?
Well, so we spent a good deal of time learning how people read Korean music and how that's ultimately translated into a westernized format in terms of notation and so forth. So I had to take that and sort of use it as a guide to compose a piece of music for Korean instrumentalists, and gear it towards Korean organology. And so to stand up in front of a group of players, right, in front of the actual hall, and nobody speaks English, and you're there, you're the composer, you're in the hot seat, you are being asked what is going on here, you're being asked what happens here. This is. I wish more aspiring young composers, I wish could have more experiences like this, because this is the ultimate test of one's mettle as a person who writes music.
Yeah.
You have to be on it. You have to know the score intimately. You have to know exactly why you put this there.
Yeah.
You have to, and this is also, I was discussing this with some colleagues the other day, the lost art of score preparation, right? Preparing a score properly, preparing a piece of music. There's a great picture for anybody who's interested, as I'm sure you guys remember, actually, of all of us three, when we were playing at Spice Monkey. I think we mentioned this on the last interview. And Mark's looking at the score, and I wrote out something somewhat simple. And Bob's standing over on the side, describe it, sort of, okay, well, what does this mean? So I wrote something very simple, and in my head at that time, I kind of thought, well, Bob and Mark, they're just going to get it, because this is really easy. And we had to discuss it. We had to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't just this straightforward thing. There were only about 4 or 5 sections where we did our thing, where things had to be synced up perfectly. But a good deal of discussion, we put it together that night. We didn't have any rehearsals. And so it was very impressive how we all came together to do it. And I think Jordan Glenn was also part of it. But we had to discuss how things were going to transition from section to section to section. So again, this is something I have learned never to assume, that people just are going to understand what it is that you do. And then to be in that situation in Korea, to be in the ultimate hot seat with people who are going to be asking you questions about your score, who don't speak English. I mean, that's about as hardcore as you can get, at least as far as having to explain your piece from a compositional perspective.
That's as hot as the hot seat gets.
That's as hot as the hot seat gets. That's it. Yeah. And the same is true here with the performance directions and specifics.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. That's an amazing experience to think about. When I was in China, I learned about cipher notation, and I still have dreams of going back and presenting scores of my works in cipher notation,
right? And
collaborating with those ensembles. But I'm realizing now, like even like in the last 2 days, I've been re-editing, revising, that's the word, revising some of the snack scores for the new record as I'm starting to get rehearsals together. And I'm looking at some of my notation and I'm like, good Lord, how could I possibly let that slide? Like some of the enharmonic notation, like why did I even use a key signature? Why don't I just go like walk out into Grand Avenue? You know what I mean? Like, like just like egregious mistakes. That's just sheer laziness, or like it's like too last minute and I had to get the score done. And I'm really glad that I have a chance to revise it now. But to do something for an ensemble that is not your very close friends with whom you collaborate with across a variety of groups, which is often the case in a scene. So you get some sense of like, all right, cool. So this is how, this person writes, and this is what I can expect from their scores. And I have this amount of like leniency with their mistakes. you know, or even to the point where there's some people I work with where I'm like, hey, can you send me an XML file so I can just correct this myself?
Right,
you know?
exactly.
But that's not usually the case.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. And I'm with you there, Mark. You look back and you kind of go, oh man, come on, really? Like, why did I do this?
Yeah.
It's just, it really does get to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving into the, and then of course now moving into the actual scores.
Yeah.
Woo!
So
can I just mention that you do have more specific lighting cues for this?
Yeah, right. So then staging guide and considerations per scene does go into quite a bit of detail, talking about what to consider and how to capture the mood of the scene for the lighting director.
Yeah. And
again, this could be ignored. Maybe somebody has a completely unique conception of how they want to do this, and they would discuss that with me.
And then they would talk.
You come talk to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So just to reiterate the percussionists are not to read the score. They are to follow the conductor, and the conductor reads the score in this case. Mm-hmm. And there's a track that is playing in the background that may or may not be manipulated. Is that correct, or is it just playing?
Yes, and it's the track on that's currently on the Bandcamp right now. It's the only. No, I suppose I could put up some of those.
Sorry, I mean there's for this piece the conductor plays a sound file in its entirety.
Yes, correct.
And and that one is not to be messed with, or is it supposed to be messed with?
Not to be messed with. Yeah, I mean, there can be some light manipulation here and there, but really the idea is to allow the piece to open up. And if anybody were to ask me, well, should I manipulate the track? I would say I would keep it minimal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only if you're confident with your skills in manipulating such tracks, then keep it sparse.
So then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of this part.
That's right.
And it's broken up into time. There's time on the top right-hand corner for each page. So that's how much time you spend. So,
shall we listen to each?
Well,
sure.
Well, hold on. So this is where it really starts to get really interesting, I think. Mm-hmm. So the only person that's really acting on the notation in this case is the conductor, right? The sopranos are out this movement, and the percussionists are just watching the conductor. So just looking at the first page here, 0 seconds to 48 seconds, to describe what I'm seeing, there's a grand staff with notation that is very warped. If I had to guess, I'd say it kind of starts in the top left and squiggles down to the right, goes off the page a couple times, comes back.
Yeah. I would also mention that the first thing that you see is a mirror image, which
that's a good point. Good point. Excellent observation. And so and then the Numa streams are all over
bananas,
all over this.
Yeah.
So
absolutely bonkers.
We have
good luck, people.
All different colors, different shades, and different deliveries of those colors. So there's flex and solid lines and translucent lines.
Right. And a word on this. So I don't know if you have the track cued there, Bob, but if you played it through 48 seconds, the notated material is exactly what you're hearing, right? So it starts out actually with I believe I subscribe to East West Instruments. I got their giant orchestral sound library and vocal library and all this stuff. Great company, by the way. Heck of a lot of sounds to choose from there. But I actually transcribed a great deal of the sampled, like the MIDI samples, of cascading strings and flowing hands over the koto and stuff like that. So these are actually the notes that one is hearing within this particular section. I of course turn this into a graphic score to capture the mood that one might be feeling right as things start into the sound.
Okay.
Into sound.
So yeah, I do have this queued up. So I want to listen to just the first 48 seconds.
Yeah, let's actually,
or we could
let's go through. Let's go to. Well, I mean, now would be a time to actually listen to a bunch of stuff. I would suggest going to about. Let's see. So go down to page 48 right there.
48.
Yeah. So right before this one. So the prelude where it says 7:55 to the end. The one before that. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So this is. I can't read it.
Yeah, I don't know why that came out small, but you know. So going to about 7:54.
Okay, so from the start,
and then for anybody who's following along, you can follow the timestamps up in the upper right hand corner.
Okay, so I'll play from the beginning until about 7:54.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay, cool. Here we go.
Hold on. Let me actually put the markers just so I can.
Yeah.
This one is 48 seconds, and then the next one is 2:27.
Mm-hmm. And each image is meant to sort of capture the sounds of what you're hearing.
And then 3:08. And so, okay, is the conductor reacting to these as you're following along?
Not necessarily. I mean, again, these are kinds of things that can be displayed. These are kind of things that can be displayed during the performance if one so chooses.
Okay.
You can display these graphic scores, but this is meant primarily for performer involvement. Like to show to the actual performer what exactly is going on here.
So I got my markers set, so we can see where we're at as we progress through this. All right, let's listen to it.
Yeah, this will be fun. Yep. Yeah.
That we stopped just before the last
there you go.
frame. Which this recording seems to be almost half of. So.
Right. Yeah. The last little part there is pretty terrifying. It's the Ligeti influence is palpable there, but that just didn't want to go on forever, but just give people a snippet of the different the contrasting moods and essences that go on from each timestamp to the next.
And does this prelude work in a standard way in that it's giving you kind of a preview of what different kinds of things you might see in this piece as a whole?
Yep, more or less. Yeah, not so much any of the musical material, but definitely some of the states of psychological shifting. The idea of a prelude giving you a precursor of the material that is to come musically. I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted it to sort of be a movement of itself, a movement in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like a traditional overture.
Not necessarily. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the bit that we didn't play, when you said that it becomes terrifying if you look at the score there and you start to see the actual imagery of the eye, that's very strong there.
Yes.
That's where you're starting to maybe show a bit of the psychosis that's to come. That's
sure. And at this point, Lady,
really palpable.
Exactly. And if you, it's at this point, Lady Dice is on stage, and she's got this look of fear, terror, wonderment, confusion. She's been in her mirror palace now for many years. She is at the moment of starting to unravel, and that's kind of where all of this takes place. It starts at that moment. And really going back to the overarching narrative, there's no moral to the story. There's no happy ending. There's no sad ending. There's really not even an ending. No one really knows what happens to her when the whole thing ends. She most likely just stays in the palace and continues to go insane, even more progressively until the whole thing, until she expires. Really, maybe it's an eternal thing.
You got to save some for Lady Dice Part 2. Say,
man, if I could be funded to do that in some way, that would be something.
So I want to press on a little bit just to kind of ask you more about the score. If that's cool. So
sorry, say
getting
again?
into scene 1 here, we have. Oh, sorry. I was saying I wanted to press on a little bit just to ask you some more about the score.
Sure.
Here, let me stop sharing here. So if we get into scene 1, we have the soprano, and then we have the 2 mallet instruments. Scene 1 is you have another sort of title card here that's like setting the stage emotionally for the narrative and for the performers, I guess, right?
Correct.
So it says the lady is presented, her innermost thoughts are revealed, the essence of her thoughts stream forward as a collection of contrasting emotions, ultimately illuminating a soul full of melancholy, fear, and isolation.
There you go.
So, and then you have the performance directions and specifics. So let me read some of these. So like,
I like this. Yeah, you read the first bit, man. That's good.
So, so I guess The Lady's Lament is a musical drama's major and only aria featuring the lead soprano. And the Blipfert conductor providing the contrasting electronic sonic material.
Right.
You say this scene is in a neutral key. Accidentals on each note for soprano and pitch percussion have been included for reference. So you just mean it's in like C, the key of C, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, effectively C major or A minor, but why argue over specifics? It's a neutral key. Yeah. So there's no specific key to this.
Okay. And the tempo for this scene is indicated at quarter note equals 48 to 54. Let's see. What else is really key here to keep in mind?
The scoring in terms of tempo follows a kind of Witold Lutosławski aleatorism. He was a composer who he conceived this idea of aleatoric composition, whereby you're going by a timed or metered construct, but when you reach a certain measure, it's indeterminate, right? So there's a measure that you reach, and within that measure, you're able to choose pitches even on different beats, and choose a group of pitches to play on different beats. So it adds this really kind of elastic tempo, or this really elastic feel in terms of rhythm and meter.
Interesting. So, and then you have some blip clip specifics here that I honestly I'm a little bit struggling with this. So, the scene features numerous streams for the throne. So, what is the snap? What are the snapshots? I guess I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah. So as far as these snapshots are concerned, this is where there are more precise entrances and recalling, if you like, of electronic material. So the electronic material in this case is not meant to colorize at all. It is an actual part of this piece. And I referred to each one of the if you like, sound clips that are included for this particular movement as snapshots. So, and on the score, if we go down.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And so
so if you go down right on the first page, right, we go right down the first page, you see this idea of elastic time and limited aleatorism writ large here. Yeah, and you also see the snapshots and where they come in. So there's part scored for soprano, percussion 1, percussion 2, and then you see the pneuma streams also come in. You see the pitched material right out in front. And then where it says Blipvert, what really is happening here is a kind of a pneuma streamed colorized, and as it says in the pneuma stream section back in the previous in the introductory pages, these can also act as visual representations of the sonic material. It doesn't have to really mean that the performer is doing anything specific. It is a visual representation of what somebody is hearing. So in this particular case, and I don't remember what these snapshots sound like specifically, but they are quasi-orchestral in nature, and as well electronic, just pure electronic sound as well. I wanted to kind of combine a romantic orchestra with some electroacoustic nerd, sitting around in his office in the university somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah. All right, so
at Mills or something.
So on this page, let me just describe what we have in the notation. So it looks like we have percussion 2 playing wood block and percussion 1 playing the low tom, and then the soprano line, which is saying the words, "It's only a matter of time." And we have, for the pneuma stream, we have joy for the soprano, However, it is splotchy and kind of discontinuous. So it would have a loose connection with that emotion.
Yep. So it's erratic, a very loose commitment to it. Yep.
And that becomes, I believe, orange, right?
Orange. Yep.
So that
exactly.
So by the end of the page, you're getting into anxiety.
Just just very quick gradation of change there.
Yeah, and it's there is no time signature, so we actually don't know how long this is supposed to take, I guess, right?
Well, yeah, and so you will. So if you go down to I don't know if you can see it on that page, but if you go down, let's see. Okay, so yeah, this is entirely effectively. You're right. There is no metered fragment for this.
Yeah.
If you go down to page 17, if you go down to the next page, you will see a small tick right underneath A on percussion 1.
Yeah.
That's sort of meant to indicate the end of a quote unquote measure. Effectively lining everything up.
Okay.
Right. So you see how I line everything up after A. Everybody's supposed to hit that particular note on percussion. As well with percussion 1 and percussion 2, with that high C natural on the sopranos.
I see.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Blitvert material is just kind of coasting along underneath. And shortly thereafter, Snapshot 4 comes in with this kind of clarinet patch that I composed. And, of course, moving on from there, the percussion starts up again right after that snapshot occurs. So as I said, aleatorism, this idea of interpreting as near or exact where your entrance is going to be. The Blitvert conductor person in this particular case has a difficult job because you're effectively kind of trying to conduct this a little bit, but then you're also wanting to cue people as to when to come in at specific points.
Yeah, you're doing quite a lot.
Especially going into 18. I mean, there's so much to convey and to try to get across there. I mean, this page looks extremely difficult as a conductor to me.
Yeah.
After B, after Snapshot 5, that's...
Yeah, so I'm seeing, in terms of the Numa stream, you have in the Blitvert score, you have, I'm seeing contempt, anger, and sadness, and perhaps fear.
Yeah.
Or surprise. I can't even, it's like, it's almost, I guess that is teal, huh? So that would be surprise.
But again, that's not meant to be read or interpreted by a person. That is what I am interpreting the electronic sound to inhabit.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not meant for anybody to interpret directly.
Oh.
However, one easy way to line this all up, and this is mentioned, I believe, at the beginning, is to let the soprano control the flow, right? So because she is the one who ultimately has the definitive written material as well as the definitive as closely on from start to finish regularized notated material.
Yeah.
So after B, where it says that Fey life, right? So the ending of life there, where that eighth note ends. I'm not really sure how I fit into, right? So so she's effectively following quarter note 48 to 52. And as you see, you have indeterminate aleatorism in the vibraphone, ad-libbing pitch and rhythm there, as well as staggered ad-lib in the second percussion, with, I believe that would be, that is a non-pitched percussion. Yeah. Going along at the same pace. So basically, the two percussionists are improvising within that collective set of pitches, however it is they want to improvise. Furthermore, there's also warpisms there.
Yes.
And so, you could be moving a little bit as you're playing this, right? So it's like you look over at Mark, who's playing the vibraphone, and he's kind of, doing the, if I can, you can probably see, well, anyway, what I'm doing right now is kind of waving all over the place, playing these pitches in a kind of theatrical waving way. You're also you also have a great amount of fear in your emotional capacity of playing this. And Bob, you are on percussion number 2, and you're playing these particular these staggered ad lib strikes. This might be on it's on non-pitched, as indicated by the by the beginning.
I have excitement.
You have a very low degree of excitement going on. You're not really excited. You're just excited to be there.
Just excited.
Yeah. See, so this is sorry. Go ahead.
This is like the rhythms that are in here that are notated in the soprano part are particularly challenging, and the notes are challenging as well. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's like this is difficult notated material.
Well, it's similar, to how one would be reading a score in an opera. I mean, it's very, you'd be coming across specifically notated material like this.
Right.
This wouldn't be that hard for a trained soprano to read. At least
I don't think so. With a lot of like little melismatic expressions in there.
Yeah, you have some just lines drawn that are not connected to anything. They just go up and down.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, so when you have the blipvert symbol and it blocks the whole score, which at that moment is only the soprano and the blipvert conductor, or sorry, the blip clip, excuse me. Are only the soprano and the conductor responding to the symbol?
That's right. That's it. Yep. Because those are the only two parts that are listed.
And how long do you imagine that would go on for before Snap 6 happens?
I would imagine that something like that would probably go on for, I don't know, no more than 10 or 15 seconds. 10
or 15 hours, right? Okay. So...
Yeah, right. Minutes, right, yeah. Days.
Cool. And
then, of course, would be the conductor's job to kind of put a kibosh on that and say, okay, well, here comes in snapshot 6.
Right, and that's the cue to continue.
Clarinet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is all to be worked out in rehearsal. And again, the soprano controls the action, and everybody else is subservient to the soprano's rhythmic following of the score.
Yeah, so everyone has to be looking at a score, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You have to know where it is that you're coming in. You have to know. You have to kind of interpret and feel your way through what is happening here.
Yeah.
What is happening from each vocal area to the next, and I mean, I've done enough pieces like this to where if I was instructing this or if I was in charge of it, for me, it would be very easy to put together.
Yeah. Do you ever do you like using the iPad with the Bluetooth like flippers with the feed, or do you prefer having books where people flip? Oh,
you mean for score reading?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I mean, if somebody was to one half dozen of the other, really. I mean, I would be more. I'd be more of a fan of having an actual book where I could flip the pages.
Okay.
Yeah. That would just appeal more to me, I think.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if I'm gonna make that shift personally. It's just tricky as a vibraphonist. I mean, I toured with that soft step that you gave me, and as a vibraphonist,
really? Good.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, playing the pedal, but also triggering with the soft step, and that got tricky. So, like, I have to keep that in mind if I'm gonna move to the iPad score model. We'll see. But
well, the iPad is incredibly versatile in a lot of ways, and just in what it's able to do.
Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway.
So can we talk? Can we jump down to page 23, which is PDF page 61?
Sure. Yep. Sure thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
So here, let's zoom in on the percussion 2 part. You have a. Sure. Let's see. What is that? That is a shaker. So a shaker starting from triple pianissimo that goes up to fortissimo, and then you're switching instruments there to some of the other percussion. But during that time, so you have a surprise pneuma stream, and it's going on the staff, kind of squiggling up and then ending sort of lower. And then that transitions into anxiety as you transition into the other instruments.
Correct.
Maybe just speak a bit about what you would want the performer, how to interpret the place on the staff for the pneuma stream, and how that relates to what the performer's doing.
Yeah. And by the way, I laugh because I can hear the frustration.
No, I'm not frustrated.
Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're not frustrated. Maybe you're not frustrated, but you would like to do it, but you just want to know how to do it.
Well, yeah, it's like this is like playing like a Fernie Hopeacer in some way, where it's like you look at a rhythm and you're like, okay, what is this? What am I?
It takes you 3 hours to get that measure.
Yeah, it's like, right? What am I? You have to decipher what the thing is, and then you. I don't like, and then you're like, okay, can I remember this? Do I have to memorize this? You know? Yeah.
Well, so taking a look at the notated material, it's relatively simple, right? I mean, it's not that complicated. Right. And furthermore, you've got a box of material whereby you can vary those patterns freely. You can choose one, you can choose another. You can play amongst all three. You could just do a trill on the whatever instrument that is. I can't recall offhand, but that middle instrument right there.
That is a splash cymbal.
Yeah, you could just do a splash cymbal wash.
Oh, excuse me, that's the snare drum actually. Excuse me.
Oh, okay. So you could do snare drum roll. Yeah. Just through the whole thing, from triple pianissimo to very loud. So emotionally, let's say somebody was to interpret this exactly. So you've got blue, then you move into red, and then you move into yellow. I mean, now that is of course how I'm seeing it. Now, this person could interpret that first color as teal, right?
Oh. Yeah.
If that's how they saw it, right? Because some of as I explained before, some of these things need to be reworked a little bit. Just in terms of color gradations, and then interpreting them, translating it to the score.
Sure.
So as far as the position on the staff, it's obvious. Emotion is a very, and again, this goes back to the Plutchik stuff that I had researched a little bit, and Plutchik's color wheel. The idea of emotional expression, right, per person is a very unique thing, an individual thing per person on the planet, right?
Yeah.
So really, the way, in order to really get inside this piece, so look at that, just starting with that shaker part. Let's say that we are seeing the lower end of blue, right? The lower end of blue, which, if I'm not mistaken, is, you might have this.
Well, plain blue is melancholy, and then teal is surprise. So.
Yeah. So again, after studying this score for a few weeks or for about a month, I would sort of put myself just above puzzled where it concerns teal in this particular case. Right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right there, I'm going back to the page. Just give me a second.
60 PDF page 61.
You're at 61.
Yeah.
Okay. So within this, right, within that stream, let's say, and all you're doing is playing a shaker. Would it be logical to ask somebody, and I think it absolutely is, it's not so much what exactly do I do here, it's how do I, maybe this might sound really strange, but it's like, how do I force myself to feel during this? I honestly believe that, okay, so if I ask Mark, or if I ask, you, Bob, to, we're going to be playing the shaker, and we're dealing with surprise. We're dealing with teal in this particular case. We're dealing with a lower end of surprise, slightly surprised. You could even interpret it that way. The idea of going inside yourself and feeling slightly surprised, right? It's like, okay, so how do you feel right now? You probably feel relaxed. You probably, we're doing a podcast here. We're talking and so forth. But now you are asked to you're asked to feel or maybe represent surprise, to represent the emotion of surprise, a very light-edged emotion of surprise as you are doing that shaker part. So it's like, here you've just got the shaker, you're shaking the egg shaker or whatever it is, and you are asked to elicit a little bit of surprise. It's like maybe it's a facial expression. Maybe you shake the shaker in a certain way to where you're surprised by something that's coming out of the shadows, whatever it might be. You are asked to dial into these emotions on a very intimate level, which comes through as in the way you play your instrument.
Would any of that be in the theatrical like the visual presentation of that as well?
Absolutely, without question.
Okay.
Emotions directly translate to how a person reacts physically or displays themselves physically, or within the context of a facial expression, to a T.
Okay. And so let's say I get the surprise. Now, how do I manifest the change of this emotion as it's against the staff here? And what am I looking for?
You have a real high level of intensity there, and this is where again the reworking is gonna have to happen, because it's like you elevate. How I originally had conceived this is, and this is going to sound kind of insane. This whole thing is probably insane, but you take that a low element of surprise, right, as we've just established.
Yeah.
And the way that I originally conceived this is why I was up for days trying to think about this. Can I have a real intense display of a low element of surprise, right? Or do I have to grade the emotion color-wise on the staff to represent that intensity from the low end of surprise to the high end? You see what I mean? Or can melancholy be intense? You see what I'm saying? Obviously fury can be very intense, or can I have a real subdued expression of fury?
So that,
right? You see what I mean?
Is it maybe the amount of expression of that particular shade of emotion? So like low on the staff surprise, maybe surprise that you're maybe just feeling with like a raised eyebrow or something, or sorry, displaying with a raised eyebrow, versus high on the staff might be like you shifting your torso, or perhaps something more visual.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And of course, one of the and this may be where things ultimately start to get completely self-interpretive in terms of how a performer engages with the score, which is that color is one of the most immediate emotional associations that there is. Like, we can make the most immediate emotional association if we see colors. Like we see red, right? And that just makes us feel something. We see yellow, that makes us feel something. So what it may ultimately come down to is that these lines, these color associations are there specifically to be interpreted by the performer themselves. And I had a conversation with a friend up here who accused me of playing God, really, within this, which I can totally understand, within this musical piece.
Yeah.
Because effectively, going back to what you said earlier, Mark, I'm trying to control a very, very specific emotional nuances. But maybe another solution is to just let the performers interpret these as they would. Because when you see teal, Mark, it's going to be vastly different than how Bob sees it. How Bob sees red is going to be vastly different than how you interpret it. So maybe that is a more logical place to go, as opposed to creating this. See, my original conception was to create a completely different, a completely unique notational system, which can also be superimposed onto conventional notation to make an even more impactful experience.
Which, going back to our last interview, comes from your fascination with synesthesia, which we haven't mentioned on this one, but it seems very obvious now.
Yeah, it's a big, big part of your thesis.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can because you're talking about how powerful color associations are in humans, there's a reason that the primary colors are so powerful for children and everything. But I feel like you could do as much score study as you possibly could, but there's certain things that are still gonna hit you in a certain way. But also the cool thing about this too is like eventually you might start to shift the way you think about certain colors.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
If you like live with this system for long enough, you're just like, right. Like whereas
exactly,
before,
right, yeah.
like I got my like. Well, technically it's magenta, but I'm wearing a magenta shirt and a magenta hat, and I have like magenta cable store right here. Like I love this color, and I love blue.
It's like the combination of anger and sexual desire.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Now we're getting somewhere. Yeah.
So let's talk about meat.
Well, this is precisely the point, Mark. And so, as I said before, a great deal of the description that you read at the beginning of this had to do with the fact that, well, look, I'm submitting a doctoral thesis piece, and I have to be clear, I have to be concise, I have to be explanatory. I can't just give them here's something cool to look at. Go ahead. It has to be explained. There has to be a logic behind it. There has to be a formula, a structure. There has to be some semblance of sensibility, behind the whole thing.
Yeah.
If I was to be working with an opera company on this, a great deal of the introductory material would be stripped down, and as far as the pneuma stream component, it would still absolutely stay in the score.
Yeah.
But it would be discussed as, okay, well, this is how I come across something like this. It's up to you to assign your own color associations to this. But the important point is it doesn't just stick to the sopranos. It also goes directly into the percussionists as well. So it's like the percussionists are getting to express themselves emotionally just as the sopranos are.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we jump down to page 27, PDF page 65?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions that I wanted to ask about this one. So
there it is.
So this one has 2 lines on it, basically. The soprano line starts with what looks like a light touch of anger coming in and out. But then there's no more. There's a little bit of slight little cloud when they say flee, but then there's no more pneuma stream for the rest of the page. And I'm wondering.
That's right.
So what when the pneuma stream drops out, then what?
Yeah. So then the performer just does what they you do what you do. You interpret. I mean, and actually, there's not really that much left, right? There's just a sustained tone on that G natural descending down to the E flat, and then a few other notes before that. Right there, it's completely open, right? I mean, you can be emotional there, you can be completely staid there, you can be completely uninvested. I mean, it's like looking at a regular piece of music. How are you going to react to that notated material as a performer?
Yeah. And another thing I guess I'm just curious about, I think it would be interesting is that like a lot of the pneuma streams are 1 for 1 with the notation, but it's I feel like I would want to see them as a performer when I'm not playing notated, like when I'm resting as well.
Yeah, that's another thing. And I had to kind of make a determination on, am I going to exhaust the performer, right? Which is why I intelligibly combine or tried to. I mean, I think it's intelligible. I hope it is, but combine the pneuma streams with the notated material because at least it's all self-contained.
Right.
And when you rest, right? So I didn't want to overload people. Maybe maybe that ship has sailed. But,
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, it might be easier to express emotion when you're not worried about playing notes as well.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. See, there's many different angles you can take with this.
Yeah. There is a lot to think about. So, with the Blipvert score, the Blipvert conductor has all of these snaps and all this cues, but the NUMA streams are not to be interpreted by the Blipvert conductor.
No, I mean, there may be some. I can't remember if there are some movements or some places where that does happen. I think there actually might be some gradients where the Blipvert conductor can experience that for themselves. The Blipvert conductor already has their work cut out for them.
Yeah,
they've already got. They're doing electronic tracks. They're doing a bit of queuing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there.
And for this movement, the scene 1, I guess, there's no, like, you wouldn't want, would you want or not want the Blipvert conductor to, for example, be throwing blip forms at people?
Would I not want them to do that?
Is that an appropriate thing for the Blipvert conductor to do, or is that not allowed in this movement?
Oh, absolutely.
It is allowed.
If you can pull it off, yeah. Oh, okay. Absolutely. In this particular movement, I wouldn't recommend it because there's already enough going on.
Yeah.
This
and it would be incredibly difficult. Of course, you could do it during the blip clip. You could do it during some of the more sedate or mellow sections where there's not a lot of written material.
Okay.
Between any of the ensemble. But in this particular case, one might not want to do that.
Right. And just out of curiosity, so let's say like we're at the end of this piece and we hit this blip clip that is like for the whole ensemble, and everyone's triple fortissimo. Let's say you're the vibraphone player and you're doing something, and then Blipvert conductor hits you with a blip form. Does that always trump what you're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because that's, and of course you have to intelligibly gauge where you come in with these things. You have to be mindful of where you are on the piece as well. It's like you could effectively keep on going and the piece just never ends.
Right.
But you have to make a concerted effort to at least end the piece in some congenial fashion for everybody. And the movements as well.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have a general estimation on how long this total work is?
It's about 50 to anywhere between 50 and 75 minutes, I believe. I stayed on the introductory page. Yeah.
Cool.
And of course, it could be shorter than that. But that's, I think, the general area, especially when all the electronic tracks are taken into account.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I want to get into some of the let's talk about hallucination 1. Which is scene 2.
This and I could envision you and Mark handling this one. This would be a fun one.
So
yeah,
it's interesting. There's like 2 versions of this score. One is colored and one is black and white. So are we supposed to read
that's the rehearsal
one or the
score.
other? Okay.
So I give rehearsal scores without all the colorizations, just as a more clear example of what to do, right? So it just gives you more, without all the colors and pretty pictures. This just gives you a much more clear thing to do.
I mean, and that's particularly crucial when you get to something like Summoning the Four Suns, like those.
Yes.
The graphic scores are just so gnar that the rehearsal score is absolutely.
That's crucial. You're right, Mark.
Yeah.
So
you need it. You need one.
Yeah. So in this case, in this particular scene, this movement, we're making use of the symbols that the conductor has. And so the symbols identify parts of this circle, and there's kind of notated material around the circle.
Right.
And is there a soprano in this?
Yeah. So the soprano is functioning in this, and in a kind of a somewhat passive capacity, right? And there again, a future decision might be to have the soprano completely out of this particular movement. The original thought was to have the soprano, kind of jumping around erratically, dancing to the rhythmic cues going on here. I don't know if that would be especially visually appealing, but regardless, this is a percussion-centered piece. This features the percussion ensemble. The two hallucinations do in very specific ways, and so the percussionists really have a chance to showcase themselves in terms of matching rhythms and improvisatory content.
Right.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, there's a circle of rhythms, and all of these rhythms are meant to interlock with each other, right? And so
these are all.
This is also where
these are all just looping.
Yep, just all looped passages.
Okay.
Yep, straight loop passages. And I would love to do this with either you guys or just with an ensemble. This is probably one of the first movements that I would actually record.
Yeah.
I think it would be probably the easiest one.
This looks like a ton of
So
fun.
we have a variety of dynamics on the page, but nothing quieter than forte.
That's right. Yeah, this is loud. Yeah. Well, yeah, this is a loud one.
Yeah. You have a. So okay, wait. So the way that this works, does the performers wait for the conductor to initiate the piece? This.
Yeah, that's right.
And
yeah.
so, and the conductor is saying, you start here and you start here. So let's say you tell me triangle. Does that mean I can play my choice, anything that's around the triangle, or?
Nope, you start right on that passage that's underneath the triangle.
On the on the first beat of the 7/8.
That's right. And this is where the cue cards come in, right? So I show you so it's like I'm down in the orchestra pit or wherever it is I am. I show you the triangle. That's where you're going to start.
Okay.
And then Mark would start, or somebody else would start on the diamond. And then you play these two interlocking rhythms together, or maybe you both start on triangle. And then I start to move either one of you around the circle.
So you have left and right symbols. And so in that case,
that's right.
Moving to the right would be moving like clockwise. Is that okay?
Yep. Moving to the right would be clockwise. Moving to the left would be counterclockwise.
Okay. Getting it together here. And then so what else do we have? We have the circle. So the center circle, which is a vocal circle here with some vocalized libretto or whatever. And the percussionists do that, I'm assuming, not the soprano.
Yes. So at some point I will hold up the cue card for the circle, and when that does occur, the both of you go into that circle. You choose one of those improvisatory fragments and repeat them until I give you a diamond or a square or the hexagon or the triangle, and you start and you start from you start anew.
Yeah, man. Yeah, this one would be a ton of fun to run.
This is I love this because this is
enjoy this.
Like this is in so many ways like the most playable part of this whole piece. Like you just read this one down almost.
Right. Well, you see, and the thing is you also get to have a little fun vocally. So for example,
yeah, totally.
What I would love to see, is both you and is both of you. Like for example, Mark goes into the circle and goes right, and then Bob is at the bottom going, oh, just that together, and just seeing how the both of you interpret that. I mean, I would, yeah.
This is like this reminds me of the I forget I think this is on Quantum Buster. The say so, say so. That's
right. Yeah, that's it.
That's a hit.
I mean, yeah, the cool thing about this is like you look at the rehearsal score and then you go back up to what you're actually looking at. Yeah. And then you think about the color as well while you're playing all this.
And Mark, you hit on a good thing there. So a great deal of this is precisely what the graphic scores are meant to do, and the Numa streams is you have a rehearsal score, and then you've got the graphic score, which you can place next to your, on the music stand. You can place next to the rehearsal score. Rehearsal score is, very basic. It tells you exactly what to do, and it helps you relate to the instructions more clearly. The graphic score allows you to enter into the piece on a deeper level, to become creative. It's like, oh, okay, so I'm feeling these colors. I'm feeling that green. That sun, what is that sun? Well, I'm going to put that right here. I'm going to put that on that 7/8 measure, and that it's a completely abstract way of you getting in whatever these images mean to you, however it is you see them playing into the written material. That's exactly what I'm going for. Or that's exactly what I would hope you would bring to it.
Yeah. In this case, you don't want the specific Numa stream interpretation of these colors.
No, there's none there.
Okay. All right. Just being clear about that. And
I just want to say, and I'm loving the discussion. There's more movements, and I don't know if you want to go through each one of them.
Well, not each one of them, but
quite a long time.
I want to just I'm just trying to cover all the things that you have going on. You know what I mean?
Right. Because and there's more things.
Yeah, there certainly are.
Yeah, I do want to, because I do want other people to see this, and I'd love for them to to explore and kind of happen upon things on their own as well. One thing I think that is important to really keep in mind about this is that this is attempting to, or at least I'm trying to attempt to kind of break open the tradition of what has been happening all the way up until now. And again, going back to the diversity of dialogue and bringing other people into the experience, and bringing other performers' personal voices to the table through these kinds of exercises. I find that to be very exciting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. I just want to ask you about the four suns and the dissociative calm here. Yeah. So this is another one where we have a rehearsal score and the actual score. So, and I just full disclosure, I'm less read up on this bit. So, can you describe the four suns and what's going on?
Yeah, this is one of the main features of the piece. This is where Lady Dice starts to transform. This is where the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb starts to materialize. And I'm actually in the process of doing a kind of hidden movement featuring the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb herself, which is actually, it's kind of a pop song. I'm sort of
opera
experimenting
secret
with
track, man.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's precisely what it is, Mark. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Which I hope to incorporate. But summoning the four suns, the percussion is actually based off of, and as you can see, if you go to PDF page 90, man, we're getting up there. But if you go to that one, the two percussion parts are relatively straightforward with some Numa streams here and there, and it's a repeated sequence. So as you can see, it's very playable.
And looped.
This is
it's looped.
Yeah, looped. Okay. Yep. Yeah, you loop persistently. This is based off of Korean. It's inspired by Korean pansori drumming.
Oh.
And so there's some other influences going on in here. So it's meant to be very, very methodical, very determined, very march-like.
Yeah.
Dirge-like, so to speak. All of the vocal fragments that Lady Dice has are to be sung, are to be interpreted along with the rhythm that is being kept very determinedly by the percussion. And she goes back to the center O, right? So on that E natural right there, right? It's kind of a droning chant, kind of a low-pitched chant, if you will, a low drone chant, if you will. And occasionally she breaks off into any one of those fragments that are surrounding the O. And this is again on if you go to page 89, you'll see the rehearsal score pretty clearly there. There's syllabic utterances there. And it's meant to be very dramatic and very, and very emotional, right? Because, this is where she starts to transform. This is where the Emerald Oyster Honeycomb starts to seep out of her brain, so to speak. So, the idea of...
We have a couple... we have more than one place on these scores with 4 Fs. So we are increasing the number of forte. So raising the bar here.
Yeah, well, this isn't... I mean, if... I don't want people sitting around, drinking their coffee with this. You're going to be hit over the head with this.
Yeah. So,
and then of course going to the graphic scores. You have a kind of a Jackson Pollock drip painting over melodic fragments right there. That might to any soprano just give this idea of these vocal fragments are dripping with mystery, dripping with using the words as maybe direct entrances into how you might interpret these from an emotional state or from an abstract emotional state, dripping with emotion. I have this scatterbrained kind of idea, and then furthermore this is on page 87 of the PDF, the scatterbrain notion of choosing whatever vocal fragment of syllabic utterances that you want. That represents that. And then you go down to page 88 of the PDF, and the percussion has this, these solid beams and lines and very disjointed kind of patchwork, if you like, patchwork imagery. This is meant to represent the determined driving forward solid beam structures, the solid aspect of the percussion parts there.
Right. So what is the Blipfert conductor doing in this bit?
Is colorizing the piece with sound fragments.
Okay.
So cool.
I guess 2 questions. How do we know that we're going from page to page here?
All of this is just one page, right? So, I mean, it's just one rehearsal score for the sopranos, one rehearsal score for the percussionists.
Well, but
and then you can,
I guess, I mean, just from so PDF's page 86 is the Summoning the Four Sons complete score, and then PDF page 87 is Chant for Dissociative Calm, and then there's the percussion score for that. So
yes, exactly.
So how do you know where we're going from one to the other? Or is that are they continuous, or is there
well, it says it right down there. It says it right. It says it right down there in the bottom. So it's maybe hard to see, but if you look in the lower right-hand corner, Chant for Dissociative Calm soprano score on page 87, and then you look on the bottom of page 88, Chant for Dissociative Calm percussion score.
No, I guess my question is how does the ensemble know to move from one piece to the other?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, so it's I describe it in the I describe it in the performance directions and specifics. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. The idea I had for this is that one section morphs into the other. right? So
Okay.
and it would be very easy because the second percussion part for Chant for Dissociative Calm, if you go to page 91, 91 or 92 is a very similar kind of percussion venture. You know, it's very, very solid, and it's based on Buddhist chanting. You know, it's just very, you know, very, very, very specific in its rhythmic continuous.
Right on.
So it would be very easy to morph from one to the other.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang. All right. Well, dude, I mean, I can tell that we could do this
We could.
for hours, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
But like as you were just saying a second ago, like this is a culmination of you working on, you know, just tearing apart everything that as you've experienced as it's come so far. And this work is amazing, and I really, really appreciate you going like this deep into it, because I know it's really personal, you know.
Well, I appreciate
but
that.
I really appreciate. Yes, I do appreciate it, but I highly encourage people to dig in, because it's all available, like we said right up at the top of the episode. And you know, is there, you know, before we wrap, is there any other thing that you'd like to say about the work in particular, or you know?
Yes, actually, and well, first of all, at the conclusion here of the second interview, I'll save this just for a second, but if one really looks at this piece sort of from a top-down perspective, I maybe the ultimate appeal that I'm hoping it will have is that years from now, somebody will find this in the database, and I'll be long gone, right? And someone will look at this and go, "This is basically the ramblings of a madman. This is the ramblings of a crazy person. I don't know what this is. I have no idea what this is supposed to be."
This is your highest admiration for this piece.
Yeah, exactly. But right there, having that reaction.
Yeah.
Going back to what I said about Gunther Schuller, let's try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Like this is the same thing that people were saying basically about Harry Parch's new conceived tuning systems.
Oh yeah.
And has originally created instruments to play those tuning systems. People thought it was, and he was a vagabond basically for most of his life. And now people they tried it. People are trying it. So that's the hope. Let's give it a try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do. Let's dive into this. Let's commit ourselves to it and see what we can bring out of it.
To see this amount of work put into one piece is, it's incredible. You know, it's extremely inspiring, and especially like modern, in this modern context, and like to hear you talking, you're thinking through with it in the amount that's going into it. I mean, this isn't, I don't think this is a very common mode of work for people who are creating music. So, I mean, it's really special, and I'm glad that we took the time to really break this one open as much as we could. I mean, we can do another 3 hours if you want.
Sure, of course. Well, it's. I'm glad we got to talk about it as well, and here at the end of all things, I just have to say to both of y'all, I mean, you guys are doing necessary work, and I'm very privileged and honored to be a part of this thing that you have going on. Much success, I hope, comes of it, and you are, you know, if it weren't for people like you doing things like this, then nobody would know about people who are doing unique creative works in the San Francisco Bay Area, in Los Angeles, up here in Canada, and all over the place. And so you guys are really doing something special with this, and I've been very honored to be a part of it, and I'm very flattered that you would want to take the time to talk about my work in such a way.
Yeah.
It's amazing work, man, and we're honored to have you on.
Yeah, appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, yeah. And
thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Mark, and thank you so much, Bob, and there we have it.
Yeah.
And I would encourage everybody to check out this piece.
Yeah.
All
totally.
opera companies.
And I mean, if we'll again link to all of your music and to this particular to the source for the scores and the wave files. I mean, it's kind of a treasure trove.
Yeah, right. There's a lot there.
There's a ton up there, so we'll link to that. If you're comfortable with it. I mean,
I'm great.
It's cool. It's really cool.
There's a lot there, a lot to unpack. Yeah.
As we said last time on our last interview with Will, we're at tones_FOR on Twitter, at FT4HB on Insta. You can find us and support us on Patreon at Fantastic Tones for Human Bones. And we're also on Facebook at Fantastic Tones for Human Bones. And follow us on all those places. We let you know about the releases of people that we've interviewed and friends of ours, as well as our episodes. So it's not just letting you know what we're putting out, but also cool pieces that and albums and works that friends of ours are doing that we think are important to check out. So do follow us, and if, like Will, you think that we're doing the good work, feel free to pitch in $1 or $2.
I am absolutely will. Without question. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Thank you again so much, and we'll link to all of your things. Do you want to say again where they can find you?
Blipvert.bandcamp.com.
Bandcamp, baby.
Great videos on YouTube. You can look up the most recent Billions of Cicadas album on YouTube. My girlfriend has been on me to get a website going, and so I think that's the next project coming up. So
yeah,
getting more away from social media, and more towards just an actual website to where people can go and find out this stuff.
And that reminds me, there's a very, very cool thing that Bob has started. We have a YouTube now, and there are some gold mines on there. Absolutely 100% go to YouTube and find Fantastic Tones for Human Bones. Like, there is some unseen footage of the absolute master percussionist Sandy Perez on there. Yeah. And I can't, I am so stoked.
And more to come, by the way.
It's absolutely insane what we have there. It's crazy. Like, it's weird. You know what I mean?
Go to the Fantastic Tones for Human Bones YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's bananas what's up there. So, anywho, yeah, I got to add that to the little talk down of the socials. But anyway, thank you all very much for listening. Will, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Yeah. You got
incredible work. I'm glad we did.
Hope to see both of you in person before long. So.
Yeah, come on through.
Absolutely.
Yeah. To Boaksland, Bakersland.
Yeah.
Oaksfield.
Oaksfield and Bakersland. Yeah.
Yeah.
you.